What year is it?
I don't know anymore.
Trick question. The year is 1482 in England, motherfuckers.
Wow.
Hey, how you all doing? It's been a while, hasn't it?
It has.
You might have noticed Misericorde Volume 2 has come out, and we haven't played it yet. There's a good reason for that. We wanted to give Misericorde Volume 1 a proper discussion episode, but just things kind of got in the way. Life does that.
Until now.
Vivian and I went back, rewatched our entire series on it, took some notes. I have some questions here. We're going to do a proper-ass discussion episode for Misericorde Volume 1 now. Keep in mind, we've now watched it twice, but it's still kind of been a while, and let's give us some grace, all right? Despite the fact that Volume 2 is out now, we have not seen it or read anything about it yet. And we weren't planning on doing so until after we were done with this. So, for those of you who have future knowledge, just keep in mind where we're at, all right? And just be nice in the comment section, I guess. Don't be a jerk. Is that good? I feel like our audience has been really good about that. If you're not, then you're not welcome here. All right. I was the one that came up with questions this time for us, which is unusual.
I see.
I don't know how I feel about this, so I'm just going to kind of generally guide our discussion here. We're going to start with the very, very first scene, though. Because if you'll recall correctly, the first scene is these two unknown characters meeting in seemingly the dead of night, talking about their plot to kill the King of England.
Mm.
Who are they? How are they related to the rest of the narrative? I mean, historically, it's not hard to figure out that this that the game takes place during the War of Roses in England, right? Fought with two
Yorks and Lancasters,
Yorks
right?
and Lancasters, I believe.
If I'm remembering correctly, and here's my uneducated take that I've learned exclusively through video games. It's Yorks versus Lancasters, who both proceed to lose because the Tudors come in with a steel chair. Am I correct about this?
I believe you are vaguely correct about this.
Okay.
So, without actually going up and reading a history book, but we can kind of like get roughly like this is an actual historical event that's happening during this time, right? Cool. That's all well and good. How does this tie back to Catherine dying in a monastery? Right? Like, that's the part I'm really interested in. How do we think this is related?
Can we also talk about how this isn't the only framing device for this? That is a framing device. It's the first framing device we get.
It's not even a framing device. It's not even a framing device. It's just a scene shown to us. The framing device comes after that, and we will be talking about that.
But also there's another framing device later.
But also there's yet another framing device. We'll talk about the other framing device at the very end when we get to that.
I just appreciate that it's not just there's one layer that we're not sure about. There's three other
several
layers that we're not
really sure about. But we're gonna restrain ourselves and try to focus in on this one. How do we think this is related?
I don't fucking know.
Great commentary.
Probably the bishop or soup mom or somebody.
Soup mom.
Yeah.
Mabel
owes some sort of favor to somebody political. Probably.
Okay.
I mean, they talk about a monastery, right? Or a place that someone owes a favor. It's probably that one. Conservation of detail.
It's probably. I guess we. Here's the thing: is I don't think we're given a date for when that encounter takes place.
Yeah,
we're given a date for the framing device, and we're given a date for the actual main narrative. But this particular scene at the beginning, unless I'm like completely, I'll just double check my notes. I don't believe we're given a date for it, other than vaguely it's the 1400s, right? Yeah. That's all we're given. So it could be that this takes place well before what we see, and then like the place to lay low is that place, and then one of the characters we're introduced to is the handsome man, right? That seems likely, but also it's just, I guess that would make sense for like why it's shown first, right? This is like maybe a not a distant past, but a comfortably past kind of table setter for how we got to where we are. We got to but then that would mean one of the characters in our narrative, in our familiar little narrative here, is actually trying to lay low after doing something much more.
Maybe.
I think it's still an open question, I guess. The thing is, I really don't have a good idea of how specifically it's related yet. Like, if we can be like one-to-one, some of these characters that show up are characters here later, or how they interact. We know that some wealthy people store like their wine at the Abbey.
Yep.
It could be that the person who owns the manor, right, who is inviting the handsome gentleman in late at night, could be that he stores his wine there, and that's his connection to it. And storing your wine there is good enough of a reason to use it as a place to lay low. But
here's the other thought.
Yeah.
What if this? We've kind of been assuming, oh, this is in the distant past, but what if it's not? What if this is very much a foreshadowing of a thing that's yet to happen in the events?
Yeah, that's also another thing. Like, this could be a flash forward somehow.
Or even just, regardless of when it's happening, that the connection itself has not yet arisen. There is somebody who is owed a favor, and that will become important, but it hasn't happened yet.
Right, so maybe suddenly someone shows up later on, and that...
Yeah.
Oh, that's also a possibility. I think the main thing is we aren't given enough yet on how it firmly connects, but we have a bunch of little tantalizing things.
Mm-hmm.
And also kind of like tying this game very explicitly into the War of the Roses happening during this time period, even though everything kind of seems very isolated, right? That's a whole lot of words to say, fuck if I know. But I feel like it was important to bring up. But thank you for waiting so patiently through that question. I know we will now get to the one you've been wanting to get to for so long, Vivi. We're going to talk for a while now about Hedy.
All right.
Because, man, oh man, is she a fascinating character. Let's start with our first introduction to Hedy, which is her and the framing device, right? We're told that this is in 1483. The main game itself, the main narrative starts in mid-November of 1482. So this is Hedy at most a year later, right? 1483, it's like maybe a year and a month at the most. What I guess the big first takeaway from that is we know Hedy survives somehow.
Yeah.
Either she survives or someone claiming to be her survives, I guess, is the important part. Someone with knowledge lives to tell this tale. And that's a pretty important guarantee to have.
So we at least know this won't be and then there were none.
Correct. We're not going to be... I just almost spoiled and then there were none. I finally read that, actually, about a month ago. It was very interesting. I did not get the correct murderer, but I did get the correct accomplice, and I feel like that gets me a point.
It does.
Yay. Anyway, I think what's really interesting about this is that she says that she's back in her cell, right? And I know even during our Let's Play, I was definitely thinking a lot about, like, has she actually gone back to being an anchoress? Or is she now in a cell of a different kind? Is she narrating this story from like a jail cell? Or has she really done and seen all this and then just gone back to being an anchoress and been like, well, that was fun. Let's go back now.
My guess is it is an anchoress's cell because of the description of not being able to see someone, and it'd be odd if a jail cell was equipped with a squint and so on.
Yep, that would be...
So that's my guess.
Not being able to see someone is an important detail she gives there.
It could also be that there's some other reason that she can't see them.
She was blinded.
I don't recall if it's described as specifically being because of a squint that she cannot see the person she's relating the tale to or what.
No, locked in a cell all by herself. She does say she can pretend to be an anchoress once more, which is what I think I latched onto in the beginning as a thing of being like, what do you mean pretend to be an anchoress once more? Does that mean you're pretending now? Were you pretending in the past? Like, what are we... So either she's not an anchoress now or she never was one. That's what I have written in my notes, underlined. You can tell my brain likes to find little patterns in things, whether or not they make sense. And I don't know that that's good for me. Regardless, I think this also brings up a very interesting question, is that because there's so much ambiguity around Hedwig, our narrator, right? We've brought this up many times during our actual playthrough, but I do want to just explicitly talk about it for a little bit before we start talking more about the narrative itself. Is Hedwig Hedwig? There are several versions of this story that still work if Hedwig isn't Hedwig. Maybe the Hedwig that is narrating to us is not the Hedwig in the story. Maybe the Hedwig in the story wasn't the Hedwig in the cell. Who would be, like, there are a lot of tiny little tantalizing details here that could indicate that Hedwig isn't Hedwig.
What are those details?
For one thing, the fact that no one knows what she looks like.
Mm-hmm.
No one could know what she looks like. She's been in there for a long time, passes everything out to the squint. After, 15-ish years, right? Because she came by when she was 7. No, so it's almost nearing 20 years. You could have almost anyone come out of the other side of that door and say, yeah, that's them 20 years later. People change so much in that period of time and memory is so frail that you would absolutely be able to convince someone that whoever is Hedwig. Maybe the soup went in there. Maybe the soup went in and replaced Hedwig with a Patsy for some reason. I don't know. There's just, I think it's very important to note that we don't need to be taking who Hedwig is for granted, I guess, is my point here. Vivian is nodding into her microphone if you can't hear that. But yeah, I mean, like it's I think a point worth considering. You know, do you have any doubt that Hedwig is who she says she is?
What does it get us?
I don't know. Not everything has to get us things yet. Sometimes things can just be fun little mystery puzzles, okay?
It's kind of not so much how my brain works, so it hasn't really entered my speculation because I don't know of any problems that Hedwig not being Hedwig would explain.
That's fair.
So it has been not particularly relevant to me.
Then here's a better question. What do we think of Hedwig, the narrator, and her relationship to Hedwig in the story? Because as the game takes pains to remind us over and over and over again, people lie constantly.
Mm-hmm.
People will embellish their stories in the retelling of them, even without really meaning to. The point being, like, people who tell stories have an agenda. What do we think the agenda of the Hedwig telling this story is? Do we think she's just there to narrate, to like dispassionately narrate events as she saw them? Or do we think that she's perhaps putting her thumb on the scale in how she's telling things? She's got a lot of power, right? She is our only vehicle into this story. So if she decides to omit certain things or decides to change how she tells certain things, it's not clear that there's anyone who would be able to challenge her on that.
True.
How are we feel like? Do we trust Hedwig at this point in time? We're not, more or less, do we trust? Like, do we think that she is that she's being completely truthful in her telling, or do we think that she's got some other motive behind it?
And presumably she has some sort of motive. I don't know what. People generally do.
She's telling it to someone, right? That is something that we noticed. Well, not noticed. It's very obvious. She's telling this to someone, narrating it to them, and she's taking pains to she's in her discussions with them, she's taking pains to be like, yes, I'm adding in context. Yes, I'm being a little flowery. Allow me to do this. I'm a storyteller, right?
Mm-hmm. A chronicler. It's
a chronicler. I've been doing this job for at most a year, and it is now my identity.
Is it at most a year?
Yes.
So we have a time frame.
This is what we were just talking about. The framing device is in 1483. Catherine's murder takes place on November 1st of 1482. So
I didn't realize we had a time frame. That's exciting.
I just said that like 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, it was at least 10 minutes ago. How could I know?
So there is at most a period of 1 year and like a month, or like 1 year and 2 months or so. I think the day Hedy gets out of her cell is the 10th or 11th. So it's like there is a time period of not much more than a year where the events of this could take place.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is not the person recalling this is assuming that this is being recollected on December 31st, 1483, right?
Mm-hmm.
Given the most time possible. This is not recollecting the distant past. This is recent.
Yep.
And if she is being asked to give her recollections of these events, for one reason or another, we don't know the reasons that she's being asked to, but does that imply, like, was there no one else to get these recollections from other than an anchoress? Is she the only source left, the most reliable source? Is her narrative being compared to a narrative from other people? Like, is the soup talking about what happened? In a game where one of the things we're going to be getting into later on is dealing with everyone's contradictory testimonies of Catherine's death, right? It's very strange to be given a thing where we have to just take one person's word for it. And I think it's worth meditating on what that means. Right? And not forgetting that the person telling our story also has her own agenda, even if we don't know what that is yet.
We at least know that certain things were specifically left out. A certain character shows up with a steel chair at the end and is like, hey, you left this out. Right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So there's got to be some reason to not say certain things.
And we'll get to that character at the very, very end of this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like she is objectively removing some things that other people might find salient.
Mm-hmm.
But why? What kind of narrative? Maybe this is a good time to talk about her visions, right?
Mm-hmm.
She is intertwining the character Hedwig's visions into the narrative as if they were fact.
Is she?
Yes? What? Yes?
Do you mean as if they were fact, as if the things that she saw were actual, or do you mean as if she factually did have a vision?
As if the things she saw were actual. Like, there is no distinction between the narration. Like, the narration is not, Hedwig then imagined she saw a dog eating its own barf and then a procession of flags. The narration is, Hedwig sees this. Hedwig sees a dog eat her own barf. Then a procession of flags comes. There is no distinction made there. The Hedwig narrating is taking Hedwig's visions and just saying and just leaving them in the narration like that. That is an important distinction.
I'm not sure it is. How would one describe a vision otherwise that one had?
Then you'd say and then Hedwig Hedwig imagined that she had seen these things, or Hedwig suddenly...
She didn't imagine, she had a vision.
Hedwig suddenly had a vision. My point is that by not... Ugh. The point... Sorry, I got my hair caught on my microphone stand, which is the weirdest problem to have. But we also get stuff from Eustace almost directly after that being like, no, you walked up a hill. They saw you. Like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And so then why would Hedwig in the telling, choose to tell it that way? Why would she? What does it mean that she's left her visions in if that's not in objective reality what she was doing? And what does that mean for how we can trust what she's saying?
I think that I would differentiate testimony about what one is experiencing from testimony that, yes, this is the objective truth. And given that we are seeing things from the viewpoint of a single individual, we don't necessarily know which is which. I don't think there's any contradiction between what Hedwig's testimony says and what Eustace says. I think that we would get the same testimony regardless of if Hedwig, in fact, had a break with reality and experienced this vision, or Hedwig did not and was lying. I think that it's worth not immediately leaping to Hedwig didn't actually experience this, but said that she did. Like, she may well have. She may well be the kind of person who has visions. And if she did, this would be the type of testimony she would give.
I'm not doubting that. It's not the fact that I doubt that she has visions. I don't actually see a reason to doubt that. I'm just saying that the way they're presented in the narrative leaves no distinction there. Especially for one who seems aware that because she's including in her telling, Eustace telling her that that's not what happened, she seems at least aware on some degree about that. So if she's willing to work that in, despite having credible testimony otherwise, that that's not literally what happened, why should we trust her about other things?
I again don't see the contradiction. She testifies that she experiences certain things, and then Eustace testifies that they did not happen. And that's what we would expect if someone had a vision that was not the case.
We should be accepting, but then if we accept that the narrative we're receiving is not a dispassionate telling of fact, but is just experience.
As all narratives are.
No. No. What? What? No? Not every narrative is first person.
They're all written by people.
Okay, yes, all narratives are written by people, but there is a narrative convention, right? Where some narratives will be told as if from the position of God, and some will be told from a character in the story, right? And even when narratives are told from the position of a character in the story, there is a distinction between the times where they will let themselves, the character's interpretation of events will alter what they are saying. It is it's all like they're talking, like it's in dialogue, versus a type of narration where it's just them recording and reporting what happens to them. Those are not trivial distinctions. And I think it's important to know where we are on that.
True. That one was just me being infuriated.
Okay.
But the rest was true.
Okay. Eskay goes to all this work to come up with questions, and Vivian but what about no?
The main thing is I definitely think we should be open to the idea that folks at this abbey indeed have visions. That's a thing that happens to people, and that's a thing that might be happening to our narrator. It also might not be, but in either case, I don't think we've gotten anything that gives us reason to suppose that things are other than that, or that there's something weird about the way it's being told. It seems to be told the way you'd expect it to be told.
Okay. That's a fair thing to have. Although, again, we should reiterate that there's no less than 3 people at this abbey claiming to have visions.
Yeah.
So is that an unusually high density?
I don't know. I don't know about the population density of vision havers. And there could be any number of reasons, I suppose, right? Some people could be lying. It could be convenient that folks, maybe one person there indeed experiences psychosis or something, and other folks have used that as a model for conveniently explaining things that aren't true. Or maybe there's something in the water. Or maybe it just turns out they've sent a bunch of mentally ill people there. Or maybe it turns out that folks are having extreme and inexplicable experiences.
Oh, wait, hold on.
Putting them together
The
in the way
second
they
to last
can.
one, the idea that the Abbey selects for people who are already suggestible in that way. Like, you only get sent here if they don't know how to deal with you otherwise, meaning there's a higher density of... Oh, that's interesting.
Which, to be fair, like, we already know a lot of people aren't here for reasons like, yeah, I'm stoked to come here.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
a lot of people who seem to be here because they were sent here to get rid of them. So
that is the thing about Linbarrow, isn't it? Is that everyone seems to be there just because you don't go there, you're sent there.
Yep.
Right? That we'll talk about Linbarrow in a little bit as well, don't you worry.
I don't know. I think you ask a second part of the question, though, about the visions that I think is interesting. How are we meant to interpret them as part of the narrative?
Yeah.
And I think regardless of whether Hedwig is in fact experiencing a vision like this or painting us a picture after the fact, it is really fun how allegorical they are and how much they tie into like the biblical stuff that gets quoted and so on and the other things.
Right? Like, part of me is like, that fits in way too conveniently. Are you narrator Hedwig trying to make your visions look more spot on and narratively convenient than they actually were? Is it possible Hedwig just had a really bad time, freaked out, ran up a hill, and narrator Hedwig is like, but I had a vision, and look at all this cool allegorical stuff that hints about what stuff that's going to happen later on in the story. Real life doesn't have foreshadowing like that, okay?
On the flip side, if folks were to have a vision, likely it would be about things that they know rather than things they don't.
That is also true. Like, and of all people, Hedwig seems to be the most immersed within the strange minutia of the Bible.
Indeed,
right?
Indeed.
So if anyone was to have stress visions, that would be like very on point. It would seem to be her.
Yeah, if it was gonna have some sort of content, it makes sense if that was the content, given that she's spent however many years of her life exclusively reading that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Honestly, of all I wish we had more about what Catherine with the C's visions were.
Or for that matter, even Darcy's. We know not too much about them.
We do see at least one scene of her having a vision, purportedly.
Yeah, but just
but
one.
Eustace won't let us see the other ones.
Yeah, which is a shame. I want to know.
Eustace keeps a lot of stuff close to the chest. Well, like, I can't wait till we talk about her because she bothers the hell out of me. She's my favorite character, and I absolutely despise her.
Darcy's my favorite.
Darcy's great. Everyone loves Darcy.
I'm going to be so mad when Darcy's the killer.
Let's talk about, while we're talking about visions, let's talk about the visions that Hedwig received.
Okay.
Right? Because there are two, I think there are two major ones, right? There is the demonic, there's the demonic figure in the hallway, right? With the goat and the flaming sword. The one that Eustace takes credit for later on.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the one with the dog eating its own vom when she's down in the town. Those are the two major. I think there are some other ones, but those were the big ones. I want to talk about the first vision that she receives, because that one seems to have a lot of weight and force behind it, right? Because when she reacts to it, everyone kind of assumes that she's pulling their leg at the time, that it's kind of her having a go. But I don't know, like, what do we think actually happened there? Do we believe that Hedwig just had a scary vision, got frightened, and by coincidence the door closed at that time, just happened to sell it just as is? Do we believe that Eustace, when she takes credit for it and says that, oh no, that was me totally scaring you and getting one over on you, and trying to warn you off? Or is it a different explanation for these events?
I think it's likely that someone did something and that Hedwig's version is embellished, either due to her, in fact, being in an altered state due to fear or whatever, and seeing details that weren't there, or embellished after the fact or something. But it would seem to make a lot of sense if someone was there, made a threatening pose, closes the door, candles blow out. It seems unlikely that there are flaming swords and goats and so on involved, but...
Especially considering she actually goes and looks for, like, blood and stuff and finds nothing.
Yep. But it's likely something happens, but not exactly what is portrayed to us.
Yeah, I think it's unlikely that it was actually Eustace, at least in the same way that she did it the second time.
Yep.
Because as we see from her her quote second attempt at this, the armor is not a good fit on her. Right,
Yep.
She's clunky and loud and stilted in her movements, and doesn't actually seem to want to brandish a weapon at Hedwig. She just kind of wants to shout at her and then walk away.
Plus, she shows up not too long afterward, right? Would she have time to go and stash the armor and come back?
I actually wrote about the details for this. When Hedwig screams, Catherine with a K, Adela, Flora, Marta, and Charity all emerge from the Misericorde. At that point, the candle blows out and the door closes. And I wrote door clothes in my notes. It should be door closes, but you know. After that, Moira emerges in her night clothes, as does Margaret, and then Darcy and Eustace also both arrive in their night clothes. The only people missing from that are Angela, Angela, and the soup. As far as I can tell, I don't think there's another name missing there. So if someone else, and Darcy does take credit for knocking on Hedwig's door before the whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But nothing. It was like, did you like my prank? I knocked on your door. I guess this does mean Darcy and Eustace are the most suspicious people here to have done something like this. But, I mean, Moira, I don't know, it could have been Margaret, maybe? If the pool of people it could have been is small. Or an unknown nun X.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up. It would seem somewhat surprising to me if, assuming that these people do arrive in fairly short order.
Yeah.
It would seem pretty surprising to me if any of them could be in armor, leave, somehow get around back into the quarters via a back entrance, get out of the armor, and then arrive ready for bed.
Well, here's one important thing. Depending on how embellishing Hedwig's visions are, it needn't be the case that someone doing this was actually wearing a suit of armor.
You're right.
There wasn't any goat, right? It doesn't seem like there was a goat. It doesn't need to be the case that someone was actually wearing a suit of armor, just that's what Hedy saw. It could just have been a figure. It seems unlikely that she would wholly insert a figure where there was none, but I mean, I'm not sure that the presence or lack of armor is
true.
Yeah. So, I do, in that case, anyone who's not Catherine with a K, Adela, Flora, Marta, and Charity could be some way involved, but even then, it feels like, I guess the point, to what end? Eustace seems to want to take the first vision after the fact and kind of rewrite the narrative of what happened for herself as a way of getting Hedy to stop investigating things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think Eustace is very clear about her drive in that regard. But I do feel like it is Hedwig after the fact trying to take over that narrative for herself. Right? It's one of those, what was it? Just seems like the kind of thing you'd want people to think you were capable of doing moments. And it seems like better for her if Hedwig keeps thinking Eustace is capable of that. I feel like I should have a better answer for what is going on there right now, and I don't.
I don't know. To me, it seems that things are likely in many ways as they seem. Someone shows up and attempts to do something threatening to get Hedwig to fear and stop. And that's what happened in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not exactly as we see it.
I think it's important that they don't actually say anything to her in that scene. Right? Hedwig takes the whole warning just from what she sees of the goat being slaughtered, the flaming sword and all that, and assumes, I guess a warning is as good as anything else to take from that, right? Seems pretty stay away. The message, the visual messaging seems pretty clear, but nothing was actually said. So I don't know. Big thing up in the. I guess the only thing I maintain on this is that I doubt it was actually Eustace.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah.
Don't think it's Eustace. Don't think there's a goat and a flaming sword and a killing in the abbey.
Exactly. But perhaps someone that I don't know. There's a part of me deep in my brain that's like, is narrator Hedwig using these visions to obscure the presence of a different character or someone else?
An unknown non-X. It could be.
Like, are these visions obscuring the existent? Are these visions in the narrative being used to obscure the existence of someone else for reasons that may not be clear yet? Maybe there's a reason that Hedwig telling this story doesn't want this person to. I don't know. It's just coming to me. The second vision, I think, also seems like the one with when she's down in the town, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then she runs back up a hill and chats with the James's. Was it not James's folks, but the folks who he was working for? Was it his family? Whatever.
I've forgotten if it. I feel like it was his relatives, but
yeah.
But I don't remember that for certain.
Yeah, but like, I think the most reasonable explanation for that one is just stress. Hedwig is not good at. She's only started being around people, let alone large groups of people, let alone large groups of people in an area she's not familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Let alone large groups of people in an area she's not familiar with that just threw a bunch of bathwater on her. Right? I can see her, and while we know why Moira and Eustace can't say anything to her about it, right? They're trying to keep her down there so they can prep stuff back up at the Abbey. In Hedy's shoes, I can see how that is maddening.
Yep.
And I can also see how she's just like, I can't handle this, and just deciding to run. I don't think there's anything deeper in that one. It is interesting that she sees God as God with the compass, right? God as an architect.
Mm.
I think that is an interesting little bit of embellishment that need not have been there, but and also that she specifically again that what her visions are directly coming from scenes in the Bible, but
yep.
I think that one's more open and shut. I don't suspect anything else strange is happening there, but who knows? We could look back on this in a few months and be like, oh, what fools we were. Do you have anything else to think about that second vision?
Not really.
All right, fair enough. Let's see here. Is there anything else? Well, before we move on to other characters, is there anything else we want to talk about with Hedwig?
One thing, I find it. This is probably absolutely nothing whatsoever, but I find it interesting that she is German and has been isolated since childhood, speaking to almost nobody, but is fluent in English. It's probably fine. There's probably no particular reason.
Because
it's still
what? She was like 7 or something? I feel like that's young enough where you still have enough plasticity to take on a language like that, right?
Yeah, but from who? You take on the language because you speak to people in it, but people haven't been coming up to the Misericorde.
She was taking all of her rights, and all of her reading is in either Latin or English, right?
Is it in English? Typically, the work would not be in the vernacular.
That's a good question, then. I hadn't thought to question why she knows English.
Though she also just might.
She also just might is the thing, right?
It could just be the case. People speak many languages.
She is German from Trier, right? We do know that. And was brought here. Do we want to talk about why she was brought here?
That is a good point.
Because again, she was young, right?
Which would make sense. That'd be pretty typical,
right? But it's the kind of thing where, like, is she important to someone and they have to keep her out of the way? Is she just the 7th child of a large family and they're like, we can afford to, make a nice move towards the church?
Which is where many of the most prominent religious figures in that era come from.
I guess the important thing is that it's not that she was 7 years old and was set to become an anchoress. It's that she was 7 years old and made an anchoress at a church a couple countries and a sea away.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Conveniently far.
Yeah, conveniently far away. And that speaks more to keep her alive but hidden than it does this is an altruistic, right?
She could be someone's illegitimate child or something that'd be politically inconvenient.
Yeah, exactly. I think we mentioned that at one point. Like, her being an illegitimate child where it's like, we don't want to kill you, and it might be useful for you to be alive later on, but also you can't be here.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to kill my kid, but also I don't want you to be my kid. You feel me.
Right. Or maybe, just the case where it's like, and putting you in a walled-off cell in England for the entirety of your life. Hey, she's got meals, room, and board paid for, right? And we know that, like, people are, like, paid to be there, right? It's not just an act of charity. They do have to, like, isn't there, like, a donation or something involved in them staying and becoming nuns?
Maybe.
I feel like I remember. Someone can correct me on that if I'm wrong, but I feel like that is definitely a part of it. I'm saying Hedwig would not have become an anchoress without some kind of, especially an anchoress in that location that far away, without some non-trivial amount of money changing hands.
Mm.
And that, again, I think speaks to her importance that we just kind of don't know of. Maybe her in the narration is now an anchoress, but somewhere else.
Could be.
Maybe something happens, her identity is compromised or revealed, and then she's brought back home, and she's now in Germany.
I did find it fun when wasn't Flora jokingly calling her Hedwig von Trier?
Yeah.
And it'd be very funny if actually she was a von somebody or other. She wouldn't know, but she could be.
Yeah, exactly. God. I'll just say I like that she's a bit of a dork.
Yeah.
Like, this is not related to anything important happening in the first volume. I just think Hedwig is a dork, and that's great for her.
This probably says volumes of awful things about me, but she's definitely the character I relate to the most out of the cast.
The kind who would definitely have an armful of prescriptions in the modern day.
The kind who learned how a human interaction works via reading about it voluminously in works of fiction that don't remotely line up with reality.
The kind of
and
person
is now trying to do it and very stressed out by the fact that it doesn't work that way.
Exactly. The kind of person who read all of the books on human interaction and is so confused as to why everyone's looking at her funny.
Exactly.
Normal human Hedwig here among you other normal humans.
Exactly.
God damn. We love her. We do. I'm going to be so sad when it turns out she's the murderer. Hedwig, what'd you do? Nah, it's all right. She's probably fine. Let's talk about some other characters.
All right.
I've got a couple that I really want to highlight. I don't know that we're going to go down the entire list. We can if there's some you want to hit, but I want to start with a couple who I've had repeated observations about. Let's talk about Eustace first.
Okay.
What's her deal? What is her deal? That, like, I'll say for my part, her actions to me speak like they don't speak to me like someone who is culpable in Catherine's death.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that Eustace was culpable in Catherine's death, Catherine with the C's death.
Or at least if she was, she clearly, that's not what she wanted, or she doesn't feel good about it if she was in some way.
Right. I don't, if she was involved, it wasn't as a ringleader thing, or like, I don't believe she was involved, or if she was, I don't think it was by her thing. It seems like someone, to me, her actions in trying to warn Hedwig, but also being a little bit prickly and staying away, do read to me like someone who does give a shit about her and her safety, but isn't herself responsible for it, right? If she was herself responsible, then she would demonstrably have ways of dealing with people who got too close. but she's taking pains to warn Hedwig. And she's not friendly towards, like they're not enemies at the end, I wouldn't say. But she's certainly not friendly towards Hedwig. She sees no reason to be friendly towards Hedwig other than to just, they have to work together.
Mm-hmm.
If she really wanted to say something else to her or get mad, or if she really felt like she had a problem with Hedwig and had a way of dealing with it, she seems like she would.
One thing I find interesting, though,
Yeah.
it feels like almost anybody could have had a chance to take a shot at Hedwig and get her dealt with if someone really wanted to do that right now.
Yeah.
And nobody has,
Yeah.
which leads me to think this is not just someone who wants to kill whoever, nor is it necessarily someone who would be happy to ruthlessly kill everybody in their way that would potentially get them caught. This seems to be like very specific.
Yes,
this
like
killing.
we're gonna bring this up again because I've got a whole C2 section. That
Yep.
When we talk about her murder, we'll get into all of that. But it definitely does seem like the circumstances around C2's murder do not lead towards someone who just wants to kill and would be happy to kill again for no reason.
I mean to bring this up because while I also definitely don't get the feeling that Eustace wants Hedwig out of the way or is carrying malice or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
I'm also my confidence that I would recognize it correctly isn't as high as it could be.
That's fair.
Given that, it feels like something's going on that we don't understand and that would make folks selective about the threats and so on and so forth.
And it does seem like Eustace definitely, like, everyone took Catherine's passing hard in a different way, right? But it seems like Eustace, even in her awareness of Catherine with a C's reputation, thinks that their relationship was closer or special.
Which people talk about, that some people probably felt like Catherine's connection was special and may have felt different ways,
right, jilted
about
or something.
That.
But Eustace is also aware of that reputation, and in spite of that, continues to believe that. And maybe there's something to that in the fact that they worked in the same room, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were working with each other a long time. Maybe it's one detail that comes up is that Eustace won't let us see Catherine with a C's histories anymore, right? And what was the reason for that? She says she doesn't have them anymore.
Does she?
That's what she says.
Okay, I don't recall that.
Hold on, let me see if I can find it in here because
that'd be a very weird detail.
It is a weird detail. You are not wrong to notice that.
But I thought I recalled something different, that she said she wouldn't show them rather than that she couldn't. That
she wouldn't rather than couldn't. Let me see if I can find.
Equally, I could be wrong.
Yeah, but either way, her keeping Catherine's histories from Hedwig, right? Hedwig doesn't want. Eustace doesn't want Hedwig running the stacks. Why doesn't Eustace have her? Yeah, all I have written in my notes is, why doesn't Eustace have C2's histories anymore? Hedwig can't look at C2's chronicles because Eustace doesn't have them anymore. That's what I wrote in my notes. And then a question later on, so why doesn't she? So I think Eustace did claim that she doesn't have them anymore.
Bizarre.
Yeah. And why? I think, while I don't see Eustace murdering Catherine, I can see Eustace as someone who is very concerned with Catherine's memory.
Mm-hmm.
I could see Eustace doing a fair amount of things to maintain Catherine's dignity or memory after her death. So while I don't think Eustace is our eventual murderer, I do think there are scenarios where Eustace might have found Catherine, say after committing suicide or something, or after she was poisoned or something, and said, "This is not a dignified way to go. Let me see if I can give you a little bit better than that."
I think there's also the angle of Eustace seems to not want folks to get close to this because it would threaten them. So, if you want to make sure nobody follows in Catherine's footsteps and gets killed, a great way to do that is make sure the shit she wrote down goes away and folks can't see it and read what Catherine knew.
She says it's because she doesn't want them to get put in danger like Catherine with the C did. But it could also be covering for her own involvement in something. Like, I don't want you getting closer because there is stuff you will find if you do. Right? I do believe she doesn't want Hedwig getting close. I don't know that we necessarily need to believe her when she says it's just because she doesn't want Hedwig. I don't believe she wants Hedwig to get hurt, but I don't think maybe that's the only reason. Let's change gears and talk about Moira for a second.
Yeah.
Moira is the one I during the playthrough we kept pointing out is the most suspicious character the entire time. And I think towards the end of it, I'm like, is she really this suspicious? Or is she just naive and doesn't understand how she comes across, right? There are just so many little parts of her character that are... She keeps her wimple on when she's bathing, right? But is happy to confirm that she does indeed have black hair. She has so many tiny little luxuries that no one else seems to have and is so happy to share them with Hedwig. She is very insistent that Darcy keeps goats and wants Hedwig to know that even though Darcy doesn't. She is right there the night that Hedwig follows Catherine to the presumably Catherine to the hospitalum, right? And is there when she wakes up. She's got posh little boots that she received as a gift from someone. What is her deal? Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I ask you, what is her deal?
I definitely think something is sus here. We have, I think, all of 2 instances where we have an explicit stated contradiction, and she's involved in one of them. So
there, in like terms of random stuff about there's a lot of contradictions in like the testimony around Catherine's death. But
that was one of the 2 that I was
for.
We
will get to that later.
True.
On.
So regardless, there's at least 2. There are 2 that I know of explicit contradictions that we get, and she is involved in at least one of those.
Yep.
That one is tied into a number of other events that happened around that time.
Yep.
She seems to be conveniently located at the right place at the right time a number of times, and she's definitely got financial support and luxuries and so on that are different from the lives of others, different from what they have and doesn't talk about.
Yeah.
So there's at the very least something is different than it seems on the surface, and at the very least either she is wrong about something or lying about it, or somebody else is. She is one of the few folks that we know is pinned in a contradiction.
Yes.
So
yes. Specifically the goat contradiction.
Yeah.
She either her or Darcy has to be lying about it, and Darcy immediately says, "I don't keep goats, but I could definitely get you one if you wanted."
Do you want my swing for the fences?
Yeah. Yes.
So we know Hedwig keeps seeing a figure watching, and so on. My guess is that is Moira. It would be able to explain why Moira shows up the night that Hedwig's following Catherine the First. It would just be really convenient for a number of reasons. If indeed Moira is suspicious, she is out there watching. She might know about the content of Darcy's vision and know to say things about goats to prime Hedwig about incorrect expectations. She might be out and about at the right time to, catch up with Hedwig and see what's up there.
Yeah. I am listening to you. I'm just paging through this.
Yeah.
Keep going, please.
No, that's all I got. It just feels... If I'm going to guess that it's anybody who's that person, my first stab at it is going to be Moira. And
Yeah.
That's why. I don't know if that means she is the killer or what, but...
Yeah. I don't know that it reads killer, but it definitely reads as... It definitely reads as suspicious, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Here's one... Do we know how long she's been at the Abbey for?
I don't know.
Because you want my swing for the fences?
Yeah?
Moira's the handsome man from the intro.
Interesting. So, how does that work?
That would mean that the intro scene is a little bit... takes place a good bit before the main narrative. And that she is the one... And she is indeed just laying low at the Abbey after having done something as an Irish person. After having committed some act. It explained why she has this kind of money and little luxuries that no one else seems to have. She's there to lay low, not to live a monastic life. So of course she's going to have these little comforts that no one else seems to get access to.
How do we get around the gender discrepancy?
Yeah. What do you mean how we get around the gender discrepancy? Come on now.
No, actually, like, how do we?
She's female. We see her naked, and she was presenting as masculine in order to do a conspiracy.
Okay, there we go. That's something interesting then, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I was trying to get at. It seems like one way or another, there's got to be something interesting here that's, it would be challenging for someone who was not assigned female at birth to get away with bathing with nuns and so on and not being caught
So
as
it would be,
being disguised as someone else.
It's me assuming that she was assigned female and that she was taking on a masculine role to be part of this conspiracy.
Mm-hmm.
Which, sure, like if you're in a conspiracy to kill the king, I'm assuming you won't say no to your co-conspirators, right? The ones you can trust are going to be precious few, enough that you wouldn't dare turn them away because they seem to be short of stature and unusually handsome. That's my swing for the fences.
I like this.
Yeah, that's one. I've got a couple of other swing for the fences guesses in here, but that's one of my big swings. Anyway, regardless, I do think we're on the same page with Moira's got something going on. It doesn't seem like her status here is the same as all the other nuns, right?
Mm-hmm.
She seems like she's having a fun vacation, while everyone else is like, we got sent here. And that discrepancy is like, it could just be that she is sincerely this naive, right? It could be, and that might explain her demeanor, but it doesn't explain the luxuries.
Yep.
And I think that, like, she's got her own inkwell. My gosh. Anyway. Let's talk about some other characters real quick. Just want to talk about Angela for a bit. Let's talk about Angela.
I think she's really interesting because in the first chapter alone, I think we get a complete 180. She gives off the impression of knowing exactly what's going on, and she does not.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems like she's like this very stern above it all. Don't worry, I see everything that's happening here, and absolutely not the case. Yep. And it's fascinating in that she does seem very focused on her mobility here. It does seem like she is. It does seem like she was also kind of sent here in the fact that she doesn't want to be here. It seems like she still thinks she has a way out of being at Linbarrow. It seems
Does
like
she?
Or at least ascending higher up than she currently is.
She definitely thinks she deserves to be the successor because everybody else is a piece of shit in her eyes.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Like, so she's still thinking about her mobility, and everyone else has kind of been like, no, I'm going to be a nun here. Maybe we'll make a thing so I can, get Flora to visit France once or something like that. But
do you think it's a thing where she is focused on her mobility and it's about being power hungry and wanting to climb up, or do you think it's about her looking down on others and feeling that no one else deserves it?
I think a little column A, a little column B. I think there's also a healthy dose of self-loathing in there.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the fact is she is at Linbarrow, so she must have done something to end up at Linbarrow.
Does she allude to something about this? I felt like she did, but I might have made that up in my head.
I don't believe... If she did, I didn't catch it. I've got another like swing for the fences theory about her, but that might like, but I don't know. I don't know that we have any idea exactly why. We know she carries a knife around.
Which dope.
Dope, yes, dope. But also, you're at a. That speaks to me as someone who doesn't. She carries a knife around,
Mm-hmm.
which speaks to me as someone who doesn't understand the dangers around them, and is reacting by taking control in the only way she can.
That's fair. I
And
carry
yeah,
a
and I
knife
mean,
around,
don't
and I don't understand the dangers around me.
I mean, doesn't understand the dangers around her, and that she doesn't know what the specific conspiracy behind Catherine's death is.
Mm-hmm.
I think that marks her as an outsider to it.
Yep.
Because she's keeping a knife up her sleeve and bringing that to meetings with everyone.
Yeah.
I think if she knew exactly what the shape of the nature behind Catherine's death was, she wouldn't be arming herself around everyone. She would just be like, okay, I know what to avoid and who to avoid. Or, she'd be taking that to the bishop and getting her kudos.
I also think there's an incredible amount of naivete in the whole "I'm going to threaten you with a knife" thing, and be like, but because I didn't, that means I'm not the person. And like, what kind of fucking judgment is that? Like, everyone's hunting for a murderer, and you're like, by the way, I'm armed and dangerous. Like,
yeah, like it's I don't think you could decapitate someone with a knife. At least not that cleanly. It takes a while.
It'd take a lot of effort. You could get there.
You could get there, but you would be like, there'd be like sawing, a whole lot of back and forth.
Yep.
It's much more of a to-do. With a sword, at least there's some version of that swing where it goes clean through the neck.
Yeah. I'm more saying it not to throw suspicion on her, but just the opposite, that if you were the person who did that, that would not be what you would do in this situation.
Right.
If you were trying to be like getting away with doing a killing, that'd be a fucking stupid way to go about doing it.
Exactly. I do think she is being forthright in her in what she says to Hedwig about what she wants and why they should work together.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe her when she says, no, this is about, I think we go directly to the bishop and screw the soup.
Yep.
We're both being used, but this is again about her retaining some kind of control. In that sense, I do believe that like when she gives her testimony and asks like, hey, what do you got with this? That she's being genuine. So I don't believe at this point that she is the murderer yet. I mean, that obviously could change, but right now it reads to me more as someone who is paranoid, overestimates her own abilities, and is trying to find some stability in a situation where she doesn't know who to fear.
Mm-hmm.
Can we take a small little meander side path here and talk about Charity for a second?
Absolutely.
Charity's kind of flown under the radar in this one, but in volume 1, but I feel like she's important kind of for two main reasons. One, she's earlier on, when Hedwig was first getting invited to the Misericorde, it seemed like she was the one that was kind of in charge of the guest list.
Mm-hmm.
Like that she has some kind of implicit control over who comes on which nights and when. And it's never really brought up again. It's just kind of brushed over there. But I think the idea that Charity as one of the elders there has a little bit more control over things than is immediately apparent is worth noting.
Yep.
It's
Maybe more
also
control than the soup does, in fact. That kind of...
And, yeah, because like the second time we see her taking control is the day after Flora goes missing.
Yep.
She's the one speaking in front of all the nuns, right? And being like, well, yeah, we can't let this happen to one of our own and all that stuff. She's the one up there speaking and taking charge of that situation. It's not something that comes up often, but I do think, especially because she has such a pleasant and kind of unassuming personality, I do think it's worth keeping in mind just how much soft power Charity has.
Mm-hmm. I think the other thing that's interesting about Charity, we kind of have to talk about, what's her name?
Marta?
Marta, thank you. I was trying to remember Marta's name.
I was going to go to Marta next, so let's...
Because they're pals.
Yeah, they're pals.
They hang out, they're aligned, And it's interesting that Charity has this kind of sweet outward disposition, right? And this soft power and social influence. But I think also isn't necessarily as sweet as it seems.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that we see being her closeness with Marta, despite the fact that Marta don't we see Marta strike people?
Yep.
And we hear some pretty emotionally abusive language from
We've
her.
got a classic good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, so we have Charity kind of palling around with and siding with someone who is not so nice at all. Then we also see Charity being very willing to take sides against Angela and, you know, jump to conclusions against her, treat her pretty poorly. So we know that she is a nice face and has a lot of influence, but it doesn't seem like that influence is really taking everyone equally and fairly.
It definitely feels like there
is.
Yeah. It definitely feels like she has control over a kind of, she has that soft power over like an in-group almost.
And that in-group might not necessarily be treating others the best, and she might be turning a blind eye to or excusing
to some
that.
other things, especially when Marta is using, I mean, I don't want to assume what any of their judgments on striking someone as a form of discipline might be, right? It's the 1400s, you know, what the fuck? But her and Marta are a very, very interesting combination. And Marta, again, with her, it's a bit more overt, isn't it? Because we do see her striking and using a lot of language. Notably, I think it's those two that leave right after Flora leaves during Catherine with a C's wake. Right before Flora goes missing, which leaves me thinking that maybe they went to go discipline Flora that evening.
Could be.
And that's why we don't see hell or high to Flora until the next day. Maybe the reason no one found him is because they know where not to look.
Yep.
Right. I'd say let's talk about Flora, but I feel like we not to disrespect, I feel like she's kind of easy to understand at this point as a character. She wears herself on her sleeve.
Yeah, I feel like there's two characters I don't have that much to say about, and it's Flora and Adela.
Yeah, I feel like Flora because she wears herself on her sleeve, and Adela because she's just not around a lot.
And she also, in a lot of ways, seems to, like, she is not slow to say what she thinks about things to react in
She'll
anger.
Say what's on her mind. She likes chess and brandy. She is very competitive and doesn't like losing, and has given us no reason to doubt any of those things.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like of all characters, those are the two I'm really looking forward to learning more about in Volume 2 if they show up more, because like Adela especially, I feel like it's I have a hard time reading on her relationship with the other nuns other than vaguely nice. Maybe we just haven't had enough of them all interacting with one another, but like, I don't know. Soup clearly needs a chess partner. Why is she not playing chess with Adela? Right? Want to talk about the soup for a while? Let's talk about the soup. Oh, let's talk about the soup.
Supermom Mabel is a fucking hubris elemental.
Hubris elemental. Oh my god, that is exactly it.
I think she has a very specific idea of what to do here and how to fix everything, and that she is capable of it. And she is so fucking far out of her depth.
Oh yeah,
she has. And she knows it a little bit as well.
She's absolutely aware of it, but she thinks if she can keep this face up and keep going, if I could just power through this, and then no one has to know, and it'll all be fine in the end. It just has to be. I
just gotta lock in and clutch it out, and everything's going to be fine. Because I've been right about all this other stuff in the past, and I'm the smart one, and I'm in charge, and even if none of these people respect me or listen to me, I can do the right thing.
I can make this work.
Get everything fixed.
Just through sheer force of will and wit.
And absolutely no. Absolutely no, Mabel cannot.
God damn. She is just... I imagine a lot of what we'll see in later volumes is going to be like her downfall. Or her I don't know if downfall is the right word, but there's definitely going to be a lot of her falling from grace, as it were. I like it from her limited interactions with the Bishop Richard, right?
I've forgotten the
Richard.
bishop's
I think it was
name.
Bishop Richard, Bishop Dick, as I'm going to call him. It does seem kind of like. It seems like even he's aware that Mabel is kind of given towards this kind of stuff, like getting an idea, right? Like, oh, we need a clock tower, or something. Like, he is used to putting up with Mabel's big ideas, and this time it has maybe gotten a little bit more out of hand than the other ones. Because someone is dead, and this is not the time to be fucking around with your big ideas, Mabel. This is the time to just get something done. Ugh. She also just strikes me as profoundly lonely.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't think she would go to those lengths to keep Hedwig around and, like, teach her how to play chess or whatnot, unless she just really needed a friend. Regretfully, this Mother Superior needs someone to hang out with, and I guess I will do it.
Like, it certainly speaks volumes that pretty much everybody there plays chess. That's a whole thing. But none of them play chess with Mabel.
Exactly. And we're going to keep calling her Mabel because
or Supermom.
Or Supermom.
Or Mama Soup.
Nope. Just because it's a fun name, Mabel. Makes you sound like a flavor of ice cream.
I think Mabel is a great name. I think that one should make a comeback. It's a
great name for an Animal Crossing character, which she is.
I also think Hedwig is a great name that should make a comeback.
Hedy is also a great name for an Animal Crossing character. I'm right about this. One other question about the soup art. Why does she want to handle the murder this way? Is it just her hubris? Or like, is it just she wants to seem smart chess mastery? Or is there do we feel like there's some other outside influence on her that's making her want to handle it like this? Like, if it was just about providing a clear answer, right? She could take the easy thing that's offered in front of her. It was James, and just run with it, right? No one would question it. An innocent man would die, but whatever. You know, you got your gold star. Why does she think that? Why does she think this whole chess master play is the way to go? Is it just hubris? Or is there something else motivating her?
I've been toying with the idea.
Yeah.
That she either has a specific reason to think that James is innocent, or has a specific reason to think that the guilty is among the nuns. And that's part of it.
Wait, this game is in Then There Were None. N-U-N.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh! High five me. All right, carry on.
Because I feel like that would definitely provide reasons beyond hubris to do things this convoluted way.
Yeah.
I think there is also definitely hubris there. She seems pretty convinced that her view of things is right, despite not that much reason. But like, I can't really rule out the idea that she knows specific things that lead her to want to investigate further, and that she hasn't conveyed those to us truthfully. That would explain some of her actions and why she would do this.
She does love to maddeningly keep things from people for no real reason, other than because especially in times when it seems like you should just talk to people. Come on, man.
And we also know she's not as oblivious as she seems to be.
She's not.
She knows no one respects her. She knows there's all of this like backstabbing and violating of rules and so on. So it wouldn't be surprising if she indeed knew of some reason that, oh, there's a reason I should think one of my nuns specifically is guilty of murder.
And that's the thing, is that like she's not a dumb person, which is why I have a hard time believing that hubris alone is her motivating factor. because despite all of her hubris, she does accurately assess kind of like her relationship with the other nuns at this point, and like the state of like the general state of the abbey at this point. I don't think her hubris would let her do something like this if she didn't have a reason to think that she would come out on top.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think she is so beholden to hubris that she would just do it. Damn the consequences. This is the smart looking thing to do. I do feel like she has some reason beyond just believing James is innocent to believe that this will work. Or at least I hope maybe I'm giving her too much credit. Maybe it is just she's so far up her own ass she can't find the way out. Who else we got on our list here? Want to talk about Catherine with a K?
Sure.
We're going to have a whole big section on C2 later, so like save your C2 thoughts. But Catherine with a K. We get a whole she gets a whole moment of open up to Hedy during this chapter, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah, we learn. I do find it interesting that it seems like she's here because she was supposedly framed for killing her husband, right? Head cut clean off with his own sword.
Convenient.
Yeah, I do find it very funny the parallels between that and Catherine with a C's death. She's known to the bishop, right? The bishop addresses her as Katerina at the one like. And she was known around Linbarrow town.
Does that make her the only local?
She might be the only local. Which would explain why, like, maybe James had a thing with her beforehand, right? Maybe. We'll get to James. I don't know that I do appreciate how her and Margaret apparently just go. Well, we don't know what part of England Margaret's from.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I guess if she was local, she would have mentioned it, but we know Margaret is also from England.
Speaking of Margaret, I do like their buddy-buddy thing. I like that we have, at the very least, we have one sort of explicit faction going on here. We know they spend a lot of time speaking to one another and not to others and hanging out and so on.
Yeah.
And shirking work together.
Right. As
gal pals do.
I feel like we also have a good shape of what the limits of their stuff is.
Mm.
Like when it comes to actually breaking the soup's portative organ, right?
Yep.
Margaret actually does feel bad about that. It's like they want to annoy the soup, but they don't want to. It doesn't seem like the two of them want to do anything that's going to cause permanent harm.
Yep.
And it's just like they both give me the vibe of teenagers who didn't want to come to this summer camp, but by God, are they going to find a way to make it interesting? It's interesting that we don't ever see them like talking and conspiring a lot, but I don't think Margaret takes Catherine with her on her little secret passageway excursions. I think that is just a Margaret keeps to herself hobby.
Yeah.
And we also don't see Catherine playing music at all. Interesting. We see Margaret with a lot of hobbies outside of Catherine, and Catherine getting drunk in the Misericorde. What else does she do with her time? What is Catherine's? I have that written down here somewhere. I have everyone's stated job and position written down here on one page. What is Catherine's job? Catherine with a K. I dabble. Thanks. Dabbler. That's all we got. I was so confident turning to this page in my notes because I was like, this is where I listed everyone. And no, I dabble. Fucking man. Who else we got on our list? Want to talk about Darcy for a bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone loves
Blorbo from my video games.
Blorbo from my... No, not the Blorbo from my realms. Darcy is
the best character.
And I don't think this will surprise anyone to learn. We are 100% behind Darcy. We've talked I think more than any other character, we talked a lot about her during the game, and like, I don't think that any of this is going to be a revelation that she is a very she's a very considered person, right? She is very firm. It seems like she has very firm beliefs and takes pains to communicate things clearly to other people. And while that comes across as her speaking kind of slowly, like treacle, right? Was that the phrasing used? Is that it's more that she is just very considered. She says what she means. She takes her time to do it, and she is very observant of others. And what was it? She didn't want to interrupt Hedwig because the words that were coming out were precious few, and didn't want to interrupt. Every time she says something, I'm like, that is such a fantastic turn of phrase. And I'm like, I wish I could speak like that just off the cuff. And she can speak like that because she is slower and measured in that way, in how she communicates. I want to have visions when I getting visions from my vision medicine. Alka-visionist. Who do you think is going to win an Alka-vision this year?
I do appreciate that she's our Hildegard of Bingen.
Yeah,
XP.
She is very much a Hildegard
very
XP.
much so. I don't know if anybody else thematically ties into a specific historical figure, but at the very least, Darcy ties into this specific one, and it happens to be one I'm all about.
Everyone calls her their little Hildegard, right? It's not a hidden part of but it is very much she is Hildegard at home.
I do think it's interesting that she could absolutely kill somebody.
Oh, absolutely. She's also maintaining poisonous plants at Catherine's behest, right?
Yeah.
The thing is, for all of that, Darcy also seems to very much have a clear sense of, I don't know. It seems like she values other people a lot more than they realize. I don't see Darcy casually killing someone.
Yep.
Like, let me put it this way. If Darcy was to murder someone, I would expect that she would be able to articulate exactly why. And it would not be a simple reason. There would be a very defined, clear, and understandable argument behind her. It's like, this is the only result I came to. She doesn't seem like the kind of person to rush into certain things or take actions that are unnecessarily put her in danger. She's got a vision minder.
Yeah.
Right?
She's got her trip sitter, Eustace.
She's going around making potions. She's like, Hedwig, you are so far up your own ass. Please come pet a sheep. Darcy has things figured out.
Yep.
And she's the only person who I think was probably sent here and is perfectly fine with that. Darcy just seems like someone who needs the space to do her thing. And then once it seems like she's finding a lot of contentment in that as well.
I'm really interested in finding out more about her in particular, though, because it feels like while we've interacted with Darcy a lot, there's been precious little about Darcy herself.
Yeah.
There's also been precious little about the social interaction in the Abbey and her place in it. And we know that while she is quiet and slow about things, she sure seems to be one of the cannier people there.
Oh yeah, she's deadly observant.
She probably has seen a lot and knows a lot, and
I don't think we've ever seen her have like a negative interaction with anyone, come to think of it. We've seen her we've seen her do a lot of cooking and stuff, like not just for the lunchtime meal, but for bringing stuff up to the Misericorde for others to have. I think we only really see her having longer conversations with Eustace.
Yep.
Yeah, come to think of it, I don't remember anyone else having like a longer conversation with her. At least that we've witnessed. That's strange. It might be the case that like everyone's friendly with her, but no one's kind of like super not everyone's friendly and personable with her, but no one's super in close enough to chat with her for long times like Eustace is. But at a minimum, it seems like no one has anything bad to say about her except maybe Angela, but Angela's got to be in her bonnet about everyone. So
yeah,
like that. Don't hold that against her. Oh no, I think her and Moira had some friendly chats at some point. Maybe I'm thinking, But I really am interested in what led Darcy to Linbarrow. And I can't wait till we hear more about that. Even with her friend, like we know, even with Eustace, we know Eustace was doing some clerical work and got paid with her nice glasses, right? But Darcy, we don't know why. Are you here, Darce? Darce! Who else we got on this? Have we gone through let me find my list again. Have we gone through all of the characters at this point?
I mean, there's certainly other characters.
Moira, Marta, Kat. I want to make sure we talk at least a little bit about all the nuns. Darcy, Eustace, Flora, Moira, Marta, Catherine with a C, who we'll get to later. Charity, Margaret, Adela, Catherine 1, Angela. We've hit everyone.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Those are our thoughts on all the characters. We saved the best for last. Maybe unintentionally, but I think that's great for us.
All right.
We're next going to move into what I call the Random Details Lightning Round. This is just a bunch of other random questions here and there that didn't really fall into any of the other categories. I have a big category about Catherine 2, and a big category about the actual death and the testimonies we have around that, and a big thing about the very end, the vignette we get at the very end of Volume 1. But there are just some random questions we have that just have nowhere else to go. So we're going to do them here in the middle. Sound good?
Yep.
Great. Cool. Why does Catherine steal the mail?
Why?
Why does
indeed?
My guess when we were going back was that she, Catherine with a C, because remember the detail was that none of the prayers ever made it to Hedwig, but the mail went through Catherine with a C. My guess was she needed paper. Palimpsests. Scrape the ink off and bam, new paper, right? And who's going to miss a couple of prayers from randos? They sent it off. They're not going to be waiting up for that return letter. They're going to assume that the anchoress lifted up their prayers.
The paper for the Greek plays and erotic novels and so on has to come from somewhere.
Exactly, and I can only imagine that's what she was doing. Follow-up question. Who moved the copy of Matthew that Hedy chucked out of a window? Someone who also needs paper?
But wait, doesn't that copy show up again?
It shows up in her bedroom. Yes, it does show up in her bedroom.
That strikes me as a pretty different situation.
Yeah. It's not someone who needs paper, but it's who moved it and why. Because it shows up in her room, and she takes it as a threat. It could just be someone being like, "Hey, you dropped this." There's also the bit of cloth from the habit, right?
And there's the Medea showing up.
Yeah, also the Medea showing up.
Those are all things that nobody should know about, right?
The Medea thing had to the enigmatic woman in the wall as the inscription, right?
Mm-hmm.
So unless Catherine with a C was writing that to the unknown nun X who lives in the walls, I think someone could reason that was meant to go to Hedy.
Even so, no one should know that there was this book in the first place and so on.
Yeah.
Right? I think the same, it's interesting that this comes up repeatedly. With the Medea, no one was there for those conversations we know of.
I wonder if someone was going through Catherine's stuff. Someone like Eustace maybe going through, because Eustace for some reason has access to Catherine's histories and stuff. Maybe Eustace was clearing out Catherine with a C's desk, found this and was like, I guess I'll just deliver this.
The other thing I'm thinking is someone watching. We see that someone is around watching. It
Yep.
would make sense if someone had indeed been following Catherine leading up to her death and did know these things. There's someone who has knowledge of what Catherine was up to, and by proxy, some of the things Hedwig was up to in those last bits.
And is
of Catherine's
trying
life
to
there.
and is actually trying to send a threatening message by delivering that. Well, sucks to suck for you.
Could be a clue.
I got
also.
a cool play.
Could also be a clue. Could be that it's not someone who is sending a threat, but someone who is like trying to send another message like, hey, these things matter for some reason. You should be thinking about this play.
Right.
You should be thinking about the fact that someone was able to return this book of Matthew to you. You should be thinking about the fact that there was a scrap of cloth.
Or even so, like, there's something in Medea that you should read and know.
Yeah.
Or like something. It definitely feels like there's something more, but I don't know that I buy it has to be a threat. Hedwig definitely feels justifiably threatened by the presence of those books, but I don't know that has to be the answer. Anyway, I actually mentioned some of those already. Let's talk about the Abbey. What are the somewhat curious circumstances behind its construction, right? Who is this generous benefactor behind this place? Why is it all strange and seemingly Why is it all strange with seemingly out-of-place pieces of architecture? Why is part of it left in ruin? Why do you witches even have a dungeon? Why is that dungeon built so far away? And why does it have plumbing? I'm just reading what I wrote in my notes here.
One thing I wonder is if it wasn't originally an abbey, maybe it was originally something else and was adapted.
I think we brought up the idea that this might have been used for something else at first, but what?
It could explain as well how someone would have influence and be owed favors by the church if, say, this was some other property in their family that was originally a dwelling, a castle, a fortress, or something at some point in the past, or half of one. Maybe it wasn't even finished. Maybe it was being built. Maybe it was already built and then abandoned.
Yeah.
Give this over and be like, hey, you can use this as an abbey, but you're gonna store my wine and owe me a couple convenient favors. How about that?
Yeah. Is the storing wine thing really that strange or specific?
No.
Okay, that is just a thing that abbeys and that just would do.
Monasteries and abbeys and so on have been involved in brewing and things like that.
Yeah,
so
of
it's
course,
not too
that
surprising.
part. I meant like explicitly the part where they're storing the wine of the posh nobles down in Linbarrow.
I don't actually know that much about the history of wine, but
Fair
it
enough.
strikes me as plausible given that we
and
know
Adela is there specifically to brew some sherry.
Yeah.
It definitely does seem. I think the notion that Linbarrow was built as something else first and was retrofitted into an abbey is probably the most compelling reason for all of the strange bits of ephemera around it. I don't know how that explains why the soup would want a clock tower. Why would you want a clock tower in a place where there's no one around to look at it? The nuns don't need a clock, right? They have a lunch bell.
Yeah.
They don't need. And you don't care if it's 3:45 or 4:15 p.m. A clock tower is there because because you want A, either as a big piece of architecture to jerk off with, or B, because you want people to look at the clock face and be able to tell, hey, it's 5:14 p.m. And I don't know. I guess big piece of architecture that jerk off to makes more sense in this context. But even then, it makes me wonder if they were trying to build something else here and that was the cover for it. Right? Like, maybe Linbarrow was used for something in the past and kind of still sort of is. Or maybe there's reasons, like, there's part of its architecture that it's... Maybe there are parts of it that maybe still could be used or restored, or maybe there's a reason that people want to keep coming back to that building and can't get away from it.
Yep.
Right? Yeah, it definitely seems... The part where parts of it are left in ruin as well. That feels like almost like trying to cover up its importance. Like, if you look at it and you're like, oh my God, it's ruined. Part of this is still falling apart. From a distance, an outside observer wouldn't think of it's anything important, right? Maybe the like leaving parts of it in disrepair is ablative in that way. Like it's kind of a shield against people looking into it any further. They're just like, oh, it's an old ruined building, nothing to see here.
I think at the same time, maybe it's just not important. It's kind of backwater out in the middle of nowhere and no one wants to be. It'd not be surprising if there just wasn't the money and care from the church in making sure the place gets maintained. Maybe it is on its last legs and
it's just, yeah. If that was the case, but then why even start construction?
Do we know about timeframes?
I think Mabel was in charge of it. That's about all I remember off the top of my head. I don't have a time frame for it out. But I do believe it was Mabel who was in charge of it.
In charge of what?
And pushing for the bell tower, clock tower project. Yeah. It's...
I don't know.
Yeah. Something to think about. Much to think about. Sound in the walls. Is that Flora's cat, or is it an unknown nun X?
I think it's fun to think about. I don't know if we should be thinking about rules of fair mysteries and so on, but I think it's fun to think about what are the things that we have already been cued in on and should think could be in play in future chapters. We've touched on poisons. We've already been cued in on poisons potentially being a thing. We've also been cued in on secret passageways definitely being a thing. If there were an additional person here, they could hide and get away with it. Or if anybody needed to be in an inopportune place at an inopportune time, they probably could get away with it.
They probably could get there. It's the kind of thing where you would have to seek out that knowledge, but a determined person would be able to find it.
Yeah, we know that the opportunities are there for secret passages to play into anything where we might need to bring one into
play. Well, I guess more general, do we actually believe that there is an unknown nun X on the premises? At this point, I don't think there's any reason to believe that.
Yeah.
I think the most compelling argument in favor of one is that Hedwig's visions of a demon or a demonic figure is her narrative way of interpreting a person who shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
That's maybe the most compelling argument you could make for an unknown figure, is that there is an unknown figure. Hedwig has witnessed them, and the way she interprets that is either as this demonic figure or as the shadowy figure, like as something that she can't otherwise make sense of in this context. And that's not nothing. I don't know if I don't think I buy it myself at this point, which tells you a lot. I'm willing to buy into a whole lot of bullshit for no reason, but I guess it's all to say it's still technically in play. There is a non-trivial argument for it, but I don't really see the point of it just yet. I guess we haven't encountered anything where we need to reach for someone who isn't already among our cast.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, I'm figuring for parsimony reasons and conservation of detail and so on, it seems like we have more than enough theories that don't require an additional person.
Yeah.
So why jump to it until we get to something that is hard to explain without an additional person?
Yeah. Here's another unimportant question. Was the door to Hedy's cell actually locked when the soup went in to go help Hedwig get her inks and stuff? And if it wasn't, who was in there and why? Remember how she seemed very surprised when she... Yeah, you remember this.
I'm willing to believe that door was not locked. I'm willing to believe that the soup had expected it to be locked and came back to find it open.
And was just trying to save Ace. But if so, who was in there? Why were they in there? And what does it mean?
Thinking about locked doors is interesting, 'cause not many people would have the key to that cell, right? Even surprising enough that the superior does, but she does, we know.
Right. I mean, I guess I don't have a trouble believing the superior has it, because we know she came in to get Hedwig at the very first moment, and also like she's the person in charge of the Abbey. I assume like she's got her ring a key somewhere,
mm-hmm.
right? There are very few reasons why you wouldn't want someone on the premises to have a key to those doors.
I will say there's definitely plenty of precedent for simply not having a way to access the anchoress, full stop.
Yeah.
Like, it would not be unusual to simply wall them in and not have a door at all.
Yes.
So
but the fact that there is a door.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Is
Yeah.
it is kind of surprising in a vacuum that there is a way for the superior to get to her at all.
Right.
But given that we witnessed that in fact she can, that just is the case. We know a key is around. We know there's a door that is usable, and we know there's a key, and we know she has one.
Yes.
But nobody else should have one.
Yeah. So did she just forget to lock it, or does someone else have a key to that room?
And we also, like, the sword and the armor and so on should be locked up. We know that Eustace would have a key, but Eustace we probably don't think is involved in...
But that's a key to the sacristy, right?
Yeah. We probably don't think Eustace is involved in, say, Catherine's murder or the first vision that Hedwig experiences. So if armor or the sword are involved in any of those and were kept locked up there, then that would be surprising as well. Somebody else would have a key they shouldn't.
Yeah.
And presumably the superior also has a key to the sacristy.
Yes.
It'd be surprising if she doesn't.
She didn't, yeah.
So if somebody can just get into the soup's office and access her keys whenever, that'd be pretty convenient.
That'd be pretty convenient, right? Or if they knew some way to... Yeah. Anyway.
We know that Margaret can't, right?
I think she said she's tried before.
Yeah.
And hasn't been able to yet. Don't quote me on that one, but I believe she has said that, yeah. Other random questions. Why do the villagers feel the way they do about the nuns? Why do they assume they are going to be asked for donations? And why are they so quick to dump bathwater on them?
I feel like probably it's a thing that's happened. Probably not a thing that happens too routinely at the moment. It seems like it's not a thing where they're in town every day, but
true.
Either in living memory or the more recent past, the Abbey has been going around hitting folks up for donations and so on, which is not too surprising. I mean,
they had to fund the clock tower.
Yeah.
How else are you going to fund the clock tower? But it just seems like for an organization that's supposed to be giving out alms, right? That's...
Church guy gets money from somewhere.
Yeah.
You're going to give out money, and I get it from somewhere.
And I guess we have had hints that Linbarrow is relatively posh, so it's not like they would be hitting up solely people who couldn't afford it, right? It's like there is implication that there are some people with money in Linbarrow. But
I'm really interested to hear more and see whether my historical interpretations there are justified or not.
Yeah.
Because there could be a way of telling this where, there's like, Linbarrow is not posh and there's like a class divide and people feel like, there's these nuns that have the support of the church and they keep hitting us up for money and they're supposed to be giving alms.
Yeah, like a very starker divide rather.
That could be an explanation. But that doesn't seem to be what we're seeing at first, given that, Linbarrow has cobbled streets and so on.
Yep.
has Catherine's family and so on seems pretty well to do. And it doesn't seem like it's absolute down and out rural hole in the ground.
That
could also just be like how things are depicted. I could be reading too much into things.
Yeah, it's hard to say for sure, but I kind of, it definitely seems like generally more well off than I would have expected of random fictional English town in the 1400s.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you had just told me that in a vacuum and told me to imagine a town, I would not have imagined that. What's up with Hedwig vomiting all the time? Someone poisoning her? Was someone poisoning her? Maybe.
Do we remember whether Hedwig is familiar with this or whether it is new in the recent past?
What do you mean?
The vomiting thing. Is this a thing that's been happening for some time, or did it start with the time the story starts?
It started with the time the story starts.
Okay.
As far as she makes no mention of this being a regular thing. And as a storyteller who avowedly goes to great lengths to provide important context. I think we can assume that if it had been going on for a while, she would have said so.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, obviously the way it appears is that it's just stress, system shock from being thrust out into this unknown world so quickly and rudely, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which, okay, fair. But also, what if someone was poisoning her, maybe? Does this get us anything? Probably not. Is it interesting to think about? You better believe it is. At one point, Hedy says, when I was an anchoress, I told a single lie. What was that single lie?
I'm really wondering about that. I'm wondering, it feels like thematically it would be bizarre if this were told and we did not have a chance to know what that lie was, which makes me think that there should be one specific thing from the early part of the story before Hedwig's being taken out of the cell that we should doubt. One specific detail. And I have no idea what.
Yeah, I've got nothing. This was more just I wanted to note that it was on my radar, but I've got no good suggestions for what it might be. I don't know, just thinking about it. Only a single lie, though. That's impressive. I kind of actually believe her when she says that because the fact that it weighs on her enough to remember that specific moment, you know what I mean?
If she told it, she'd have to tell it to someone. And it seems like she's not saying, I am saying in the framing device a lie about my times an anchoress. She's saying when I was an anchoress.
Right.
In fact, I told someone a lie.
That's what I meant.
Seems to make it pretty likely. Yeah, I know. I'm not trying to contradict you there. I'm trying to get to the next sentence, which is, so it seems that we mostly see her interact with who we assume is Catherine too. Did she say a lie to Catherine too? Specifically? Maybe.
I wonder if it's going to be something as anodyne as like, I told her I was happy. There is a version, a world where the lie is just something like that.
Yeah.
It's worth keeping in your back pocket. Other random stuff. Eustace says at one point, hey, remind me, Margaret, what happened to the superior before ours? It's kind of like a vague threat.
What did?
What? What's that about? That's it. I don't have anything, like some of these are just things observations I wrote down being like, that's weird. Why don't we know anything else about this? Why don't we know anything about what did happen to the superior before theirs, huh? And why would Eustace kind of bring that up to put pressure on Margaret? I think Margaret broke the previous superior's portative organ. That another one where I don't really necessarily think we have anything else to add on to it other than that's a really spicy detail and I want to know more. One last thing. What do we think actually happened to Flora in that final scene? Why do we think that supposedly no one checked the hallway where Hedwig found her? You know, the Hedwig where Hedy's cell was.
Mm-hmm.
If indeed, did I already mention my theory that maybe Marta and Charity had took her aside that evening to discipline her?
Yep.
Yeah. Maybe Marta and Charity disciplining some nuns is already a known thing, and they're like, oh, Flora went missing. They're probably doing something with her. We just need to not put up a token effort, but we're not going to find her. Was she... But what about that last scene? Was she actually trying to... Just showed up all of a sudden and started, run away, Hedwig, run away! There's a big demon beast chasing me. Sorry, I went to your cell real quick to grab the paints. I don't know. I am so I'm the Marta and Charity disciplining her theory is my best guess at trying to find a way to make those final moments make sense.
What do you mean by the final moments make sense?
Like why Flora would suddenly come out of nowhere like a full day later, running for her life like she had just escaped something. And then immediately gets caught in a door.
See, to me, that seems like it would make less sense, right? If there's some established thing where Charity and Marta are maintaining discipline by occasionally taking folks aside and punishing them in some way.
Yep.
It'd be kind of surprising for it to result in a chase through the Abbey and slamming someone in a door and so on. It'd be kind of surprising for Flora to say nothing of it, but instead to relate something different.
Yeah, but then, like, what else is happening?
I know. I have no idea. It seems like your theory provides a great explanation for what happens to Flora the night of. Why isn't she there?
Yeah,
She
and
kind of
maybe
goes
like she is.
missing.
Yeah, and
But-
that maybe she has somehow escaped whatever this was and said like, "Fuck this, I'm done. I'm just trying to get out of here."
Yeah.
And then is being chased and runs into Hedwig, and Hedwig has no context for any of this. She's like, "Quick, Hedwig!"
It's just interesting that it seems like a great theory specifically for why she would go missing the night before, but doesn't seem like it's a
Yeah.
great theory for what we witnessed the day after. There's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
discrepancy there. It's not like we have one neat explanation that's would make everything make sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I struggle to come up with any other version of those events. Do you have any? Have you thought about that at all? Have you got anything else for that final scene?
I got fucking nothing. I assumed that Flora is indeed fleeing somebody and is afraid as she seems to be. I assume
Where
that,
the heck was she then? Do we
I don't know.
in the walls?
I assume that if she knew what was going on, it would probably have gone differently. If someone was chasing you and you knew who it was, why would that not be the first thing out of your mouth?
Right.
So
like,
that's-
Hedwig, run! Charity's got a knife.
Yeah, that would seem to be the most relevant detail. So if you believe you're under threats and by someone,
Mhm.
conveying the someone to avoid the threat.
So you believe that she doesn't know what the threat is, but just knows she's in danger.
Yeah.
Okay. So then where do we think she was for that day or so? In the walls?
I don't know. Could well be that she was taken aside and punished and then went around and sulked. Could be something else.
Mhm.
It's not clear to me.
Okay.
Could be that she just has her own haunts and goes to be a teenager. in
Actually, you know what?
places.
It would be surprising if Flora, as a sulky teenager, did not have somewhere she could go to not be found. It's just weird that if she went missing, no one would think to mention that first. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like if she was missing, but was known to kind of do that from time to time, people would be like, "Oh, Flora's probably just gone off to sulk again. She'll show up in a day or so."
Didn't folks kind of not take it too seriously to begin with and think she might show up in a day or so?
I don't know that people seemed to take it seriously, didn't they? They were very, at least, like when Charity was getting them all riled up, like we won't let this happen. No.
Wasn't that the day after when she
Yeah, that
still
was the
wasn't
day-
back?
You're right. That was the day after when she still wasn't back. You're absolutely right. So maybe like they did a token effort that evening to find her, and then yeah, I think maybe you're right. I just find it weird that no one would explicitly mention that, especially to Hedwig, who has no context for. Then again, people love to not mention things to Hedwig. It's like one of their favorite hobbies. All right, we're in the second half now, and that means it's finally time to talk about C2. Let's talk about Catherine II with a big ol' C. Who the fuck was Catherine II?
Yeah.
Just generally speaking, what do we know about her? We know she was kind of like a manic pixie dream nun.
Yeah.
And this is something a conclusion we came to during the recording, right? I don't think this describes all of her character, but it's an important aspect of it, right? She is manic. She has a lot of interests and likes to get other people interested in things, and then just as quickly will drop them and move on to something else, which can leave nuns around the abbey feeling jilted,
Mhm.
right? That was the word used. And she's a dabbler, right? Where Catherine I dabbles, Catherine II is a professional dabbler. We know she was the previous chronicler and wrote a fair amount, according to Eustace.
Mhm.
Although she won't let us see it. But we also know that she found time to do a whole bunch of other things. She wanted everyone to learn how to use the sword. She wanted to write the King of France, was it?
Yeah.
Right, that one time. It seems a lot like Catherine II is someone who felt very trapped within Linbarrow. It seems like, or I don't even know that she maybe saw it that way, but it seems like she had a lot to offer everyone, and was And it feels from people's stories like a lot of Linbarrow kind of stifles that by nature of being Linbarrow. Right? You're kind of stuck in the middle of piss all nowhere. You don't have the freedom to write the King of France. We also know that Eustace kind of takes exception to... Why am I wearing headphones?
Yeah, why indeed? There's no sound other than us talking in real life.
I did the mic check and then I kept the headphones on. What is wrong with me?
Okay, I gotcha.
We also know that Eustace takes exception to that. We talked about this briefly with Eustace, but she sees their relationship as even closer, even knowing that part of her personality, and that there are other parts of her personality that people might be papering over or might be ignoring. She's dead now. It's kind of rude to speak ill of the dead, right? You generally want to form fond memories around them to keep those with you. And it doesn't seem like people had a paucity of fond memories with her.
Yep.
Whatever issues led to her being killed, it does seem like people genuinely, on the whole, liked her.
Yep.
Right? That doesn't mean that there aren't parts of her personality that weren't bad, just not ones that people are sharing with us at this point. And on the whole, it doesn't seem like a good reason to kill her.
Yeah.
Then again, it does seem like she fits the perfect profile of someone who puts their nose somewhere it shouldn't belong.
Yep.
Maybe Eustace is feeling burnt after going through this with Catherine II as well.
How do you mean?
Maybe Eustace is warning Hedwig because she's like, I kept trying. Maybe part of that is that she kept trying to warn Catherine II about putting her nose in places she shouldn't, and look where that ended up for her.
That makes sense.
Right. Catherine II does seem like the kind of person to find something and then not let it go. At least from what we know. Again, we kind of left to fill in a lot of parts of her personality on her own, which, I get is by design, but it definitely seems like she could get in over her head. But she also seemed to have a lot of skills that you wouldn't expect of people at a random nun place.
Yep.
She was also the person who orchestrated the agreement among all the nuns to keep the soup out of their affairs, which was an interesting thing to learn. We know she also had visions, at least according to Darcy. And she ostensibly was the person Hedwig was talking with in those intro scenes.
Yep.
Do we know for sure anything else about her?
Sword.
She taught everyone how to use a sword.
Music. Chess.
She liked music. Regular Renaissance nun. She obviously could write and probably read a lot. That would seem to fit in with her. Do we know anyone she didn't get along with? Have we really heard Charity or Marta talk about her? We don't even know her relative age, do we?
Yeah.
I'm assuming she'd be assuming at least her 20s. I'm something about her, the way everyone describes her reads to me as young, youthful adults, ignorance not fully yet tramped down by the world.
Did we get anything about relative age or arrival time with the Catherine I, Catherine II stuff?
Not that I have in my notes. If we did, someone will let us know, I'm sure, but I don't know off the top of my head. I
thought we got something like she was here before Catherine won, but lost the contest, so she gets the number 2, but that might have been...
I do remember them having a contest, and she lost.
By me.
But I don't remember if that also included her being there before Catherine I. What was it? Eustace said Catherine II couldn't leave well enough alone.
Yep.
Yeah, the more I think about it, the more I'm reading Eustace's actions as not wanting a repeat of what happened with Catherine II.
Yep, which makes sense. That's pretty much explicitly what she's saying.
Yep. But then, what was it that got a bee in Catherine II's bonnet?
We already know there's political favors and stuff involved with the Abbey, and a war and an attempt to kill the King of England and so on. So it wouldn't be surprising if it were somehow that.
If somehow she uncovered something related to that at the Abbey?
Yeah.
Maybe.
It doesn't need to be that, but that's at least, it makes sense.
I guess let's just formally talk about, why do we think she died? Why do we think it was because she was sticking her nose into things that she shouldn't have stuck it in, and then she was killed for knowing too much?
I'm going to say I'm actually not so sure. Despite having just advanced this theory myself, I'm not so sure, specifically because of the way she died.
Yeah, there's like it because the way she died seemed very my brain is giving me the word ornamental, and that's not the word I want. There is a very intentional posturing to her death, right? Or at least how it was presented afterwards. According to Eustace, she was attacked beforehand. They found other injuries on her body beyond just the beheading, right? So it was like, which makes it seem like there was an encounter and then the beheading happened after. So likely she didn't die from the beheading. She probably died or was incapacitated from something else and then was beheaded after the fact.
She's also not the only one that we know to have been allegedly beheaded by their own sword, right? Like, the same was supposed to have been what Catherine I allegedly did to her husband.
So there's a version of this where it's somehow a message to Catherine the First?
Or an attempt to pin it on her. Like,
or like...
We already know someone who beheads people with swords that she takes from them.
So if they attempted to pin it on her, then they did a pretty poor job of it, that no one's believed for even a moment she was guilty of this.
Yep. Maybe they didn't account for James being there.
Maybe. James? We're not going to... After we're done talking about C2 generally, we'll go talk about, like, specifically our testimonies from that day. But, yeah, James does seem like a victim of circumstance in this case. At least that's how the game is painting him, and I don't see any reason to doubt it right now. Right? I don't think he was... I think he was a convenient someone to take the fall. But that begs the question, what would have happened if James wasn't there? If James wasn't here to take the fall, how would this have happened?
I think there would have been a very different story in terms of finding who gets locked up and blamed.
Exactly, because it's... Does that mean they waited for someone like James to be here to make that move? Or were they desperate enough to kill her, damn the consequences, and it just so happened someone was there to take the fall?
Doesn't even need to be desperate. Like, it could very well be this was an attempt to pin it on Catherine I.
Right.
And it's only through sheer coincidence that that's not what happened. Someone else was there who was an even more convenient and easy target. Because there's someone there who shouldn't have been and was suspiciously
Think a little bit more about
around.
The message of trying to pin it on Catherine I, though.
Mm-hmm.
The person she killed previously was her husband.
Mm-hmm.
What are they trying to say about her relationship with Catherine too? What, like, because I agree, the aesthetics of it seemed very similar in a striking way. But what, in sending a message, what is the message being sent? Like, they're framing. Are they trying to say this is Catherine with a K's MO, or are they trying to imply something untoward about Catherine with a K?
I don't know.
And something untoward, I mean, she gay. That would be the untoward thing that she would. I didn't mean that being gay is untoward. I was just trying to be I can't help but get over the idea that her body, that the way she died and the way she was posed are not necessarily related.
Yep.
Right? I can't help but keep coming back to that.
I mean, almost assuredly not the same.
Well, I mean, like, not the same, but also that I don't think the person who killed her is also the person who posed her.
Oh, that's interesting. Spin that out for me.
Yeah. Because I don't know, because if you're trying to kill someone and you want to get away with it, as they think they obviously thought they could have, if then why would you call attention to it in such an audacious way? It just seems like, I don't know, it just seems like such a strange way to go about things. To be like, I'm going to kill someone, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it, rather than I'm going to kill someone and try to get away and keep my hands clean. Right? One of those seems like the motive of someone who has an intention to kill, And one of them seems like the motive of someone who doesn't care if they get caught, or maybe intends the death to send a message.
Does it mean they intend to get caught?
I don't know that it means they intend to get caught, but it means that they certainly aren't thinking about getting away.
Does it mean that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if someone was dead set on getting away, getting away with it after murdering someone, they wouldn't go to all the trouble to take the time to pose the body and leave it in a place where it would be found nearly immediately in the next morning. That sounds like that's, if you intended to get away with it, that's like the worst thing you could do. You're doing yourself no favors by going to all that extra effort to make it more likely that it's found in a short period of time.
It might do you a lot of favors if finding the actual circumstances would have led to your identity, and instead finding this leads to them not finding you.
Exactly. So getting to the point of like, so then one reason why they might pose it this way is because it hides the original way that she died.
Yeah.
Right. So, but not, which would mean that there was something telling about how she died at first, or something into how the way that she died originally that could possibly be traced back.
Maybe.
Or maybe just in looking at all of this, all the spectacle of how they posed her body prevents people from asking other questions about it up to that point. It allows a narrative to take place that kind of hijacks control of the situation, rather than just seeing, oh, I found her slumped over in a chair somewhere. Let's go into murder investigation mode.
Yep.
That's an interesting thought. I've also been consumed with the idea that there might be more than just one party involved in the spectacle of Catherine's death.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe there was her death, and then maybe another party has found her body and didn't agree with how she died. I can imagine a scenario where Eustace, for example, finds Catherine with a C, killed and left in her left somewhere coldly, and takes exception to that and wants to give her tries to give her a more weirdly beautiful death, a death that has a little bit more dignity to it. Because say what you will, like there is something poetic and intentional about leaving a body with its head in its arms and the sword in the ground in the middle of the abbey. That is a tableau that will stick with everyone. There's a certain amount of unnatural, almost grace to it in that kind of a scene. There is nothing memorable to be found in a body that was slumped over in a chair.
I'm not sure I buy several of those points.
Well,
I think a lot of things are memorable about someone close to you dying in any way,
yeah.
even especially if it's foul play of some sort. It also, the motivation you're describing, I'm not sure that I buy it. So you don't like that someone died in an ignominious way, so you decapitate them and put them out on display and create a whole mystery out of things that makes it harder to find out what's going on. Like, why would someone do that? That doesn't sound like a motive that people would generally have.
Another idea that's crossed my mind is maybe perhaps one of the original reasons she died was something like suicide.
See, that makes a lot more sense, because suicide, there'd be a reason that folks
be
would
like,
want
oh, I don't
her
want you to think of someone, I don't want your last thoughts of her to be she committed suicide.
Yeah, she wouldn't be able to get a proper burial and stuff,
Right.
probably. So this would be, well, hey, if it's a murder, if someone killed her, if it was some horrific act of foul play, then, like, folks won't find out that she actually gave up and killed herself. She can get a burial and have respect in her final moments. That's a motivation I can buy.
Yeah. There's also the idea that maybe her being killed by one faction in one way becomes inconvenient for a second faction.
Wheels within wheels.
Yeah, wheels within wheels, right? It is the wheels within wheels moment. I'm trying not to just immediately reduce it down to one conspiracy party has to be responsible for every aspect of this. It's just it just seems like that would be a large conclusion to jump to. But also, Here's one other thing that's been bothering me. Here's another thing that's been bothering. A lot of people don't believe James actually did this, right? So why is it so important for them all to publicly say that they do? We know from the Soup's point of view, it's important for her to maintain order that someone take the fall for this. Whether or not she personally believes, according to what she said to Hedwig, whether or not she believes personally James is responsible, someone needs to be handed over to the bishop as taking the blame for this. Eustace clearly doesn't believe James did it, but also is unwilling to say so. And in fact, it resists Hedwig's provocations to break that line. Angela does believe James did it, but is willing to entertain a different scenario. What is important to the rank and file nuns about James being responsible?
I guess I'd say I'm not sure yet whether it is. We know a couple of specific people's viewpoints, but I don't know if we know that it is the case that there is a specific reason for them all to publicly say he did. I think we have pretty good reasons for the folks we've mentioned specifically about it for the reasons they would.
Why would Eustace not want to advance the idea that James was innocent?
Doesn't she explicitly say so? I thought in the conversation she was like, if it's not James, that means it's someone here.
Right. Okay. That's what I'm getting. Like, okay. Yeah.
That's a very good reason to be like, yeah, I know that someone here is a killer. I am trying to keep you away from this so you're not the next victim. Because of that, we need to shut the fuck up and stop looking into this and be like, yep, it was James. Because that way we don't get
better
killed.
James than making than advancing the fact that one of us is a killer. Yeah. Okay.
And it doesn't surprise me that Angela would both blame James and be willing to entertain the alternative, because I think she's a complete outsider and has no idea what the fuck is going on.
Yeah.
So she wouldn't suspect that there's a specific conspiracy that caused someone to die for particular reasons that looking into it would be dangerous. So, she'd be perfectly willing to both jump to the conclusion, yeah, it's James, and also perfectly willing to be like, it might not be. I'll talk about that because,
Yeah.
What is the danger? She is probably not clued in on who specifically might be dangerous or why or how much danger there is.
And yet, she is clued in on some danger, right?
True.
Yeah, because she carries around the knife. But, do we think that Catherine's death is related at all to the bit of plot we get about the regicide plot from the beginning?
Maybe.
Do we think it's at all related to that, or it's its own circumstance that those plots will instead intersect in a way that's completely organic and outside that scope?
I think it's a solid maybe.
That's fair.
They'll definitely at least intersect in some way, because it'd definitely be really inconvenient if this abbey, which we already expect will be or has been in some way involved in the plot, a murder happens at it and suddenly it's the site of scrutiny when it shouldn't be, and that fucks everything up. So at the very least, they're going to intertwine. But I don't know if this already intertwined and that's why Catherine died or not.
Right. Like perhaps like some scenario where Catherine dies and brings higher scrutiny to Linbarrow, and that itself uncovers something else that the perpetrator wanted revealed. Again, a whole wheels within wheels motivation there, but it's interesting that on the surface of it, nothing really connects the two threads we've been pulling on, right? The one very tiny thread at the very beginning and the main thread of our narrative. We've already talked about why the Soup wants to handle it this way, right?
Yeah.
I had a question on here at one point. Do we know that this is actually her body? Yes, I'm pretty sure we do know it's her body because her head's in her hands.
Yeah, I think it'd be surprising.
Yeah.
If it weren't. We haven't been clued in on twins and body doubles and so on.
Exactly.
So.
I think I wrote that down at one point in my notes of being like, do we know this for sure? And then I went back and read, oh, right, her head is in her hands. Of course we know. That it would be weird if it wasn't. I just felt like covering it real quick.
Yep.
We talked about the importance of removing her head. The sword beside her. Do we believe the sword beside her is actually the murder weapon?
Seems pretty unlikely.
Right. At best, you might say it was the one that was used to decapitate her, but I doubt it was the way she was killed to begin with.
It'd
even
even
then-
be weird if it had been used to decapitate someone, but then showed no sign of use.
Exactly, and that's the weird. Because what was the thing Angela said? Oh, James wiped off the blood with his cloak and left it by his cart.
Yeah, why would
Yeah.
you do that? It'd make a lot more sense if somebody else
Conveniently leaving the evidence in the open. Yeah, and we know that there are, what, 2 swords, at least?
Do we?
I thought we did. Because wasn't there, Catherine's sword had, was the sword near her body her sword, or? Yeah, because there was James's traveling sword, and then there was Catherine's sword.
Mm.
Right? There are at least 2 weapons in play here. James did carry a sword with him.
Which in itself, not just everybody has a sword. That's pretty...
Yeah, I remember thinking that's it's strange, especially for someone doing a short route like that, down from the town up to the Abbey. What danger are you expecting to come up to you on that road?
That's not surprising to me at all. It would be pretty expected, I'd think, for someone traveling around to want to have something to protect themselves. It's surprising to me that it's a sword specifically, given that swords are not ubiquitous and cheap in the way that, say, a pike or something like that is.
Right. Why wouldn't he carry around the superior weapon, a polearm?
But not that, in the sense of there are common weapons that any old rando might be able to get their hands on. And as I understand it, a sword would not have been one of those. That would be one that would take some intention and money or having it passed down to you by someone or something.
Yeah. And that implies a certain level of, I guess, well-to-do-ness on James's behalf?
Or something.
Or something. I don't know that well-to-do-ness is the right word, but he has a sword and that is not expected, so there is some explanation for that needed. At long last, we got to the part of this I'm most excited about, actually.
The testimony.
The testimony. I've got 4 sets of testimony here.
Which is more than I remembered. I only remembered there were 2.
I only had, we had 2 sets of testimony, and then we have James's story, and then we have Darcy, who made a couple of comments about it as well. And I only remembered her comments when I was going back through and compiling all this stuff, but she makes some really interesting observations.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through these with y'all right now, just so it's all fresh in our heads, and we're going to talk about some of the very obvious contradictions in these, because, hoo boy, it is getting hard to make a picture of this. So let's start with what James says. James is the one who makes supply deliveries from the village, right? He claims he had forgotten to deliver a letter. He got back down to town, saw it laying in the dirt when he got to the bottom of the hill, and decides to come back, what he says, first thing next morning to deliver it. And he claims not to have looked at it or knows what's in it. He then says he arrived late with the missing letter. This would have been on the night before. This would have been on the night when Catherine dies. So I got caught up for a while on the dates there, but I don't think it actually means anything. It's not super important. He says he arrived late with the missing letter and notices the sister I normally hand them off to wasn't where I would normally find her. It's important to note Eustace is the one who sorts the mail, but later on he confirms he is talking about specifically looking for Catherine II, and he would normally look for her up in the library on the 2nd floor of the monastery. He passes no one else on his way to the library, but he does encounter Catherine I there, as he later says. He then says he didn't want to overstay his welcome and attempted to go find Catherine II. He wouldn't dare look in the dorms, but he couldn't find her in the Misericorde. So he did go looking around a bit, but specifically said he didn't look in the dorms. He did look through the Misericorde. He was looking for someone else to give the letter to for a bit, which is strange after he had originally seen Catherine I, but he claims not to know the monastery at all very well. He didn't leave it on a table because, as he says, job halfway done is worse than not done at all. He was looking around for someone to ask for help when someone grabbed him and said they caught him, which he later says, based on Hedwig's description, was probably Angela. He doesn't know anything when told about the blood on his tunic. He left that tunic in his cart, as he was only there to deliver a letter. He wasn't wearing a tunic when Angela got him, and Catherine I can vouch for that. Important things here is that when he arrived late, and when he is found the next morning, a lot of time passes. And we know some of that is spent with Catherine. And he leaves that part out of his story here.
I am interested in the timeline here. Because this, now that you've written it out, I am finding there is an extra day involved that I didn't think was there. So is he testifying that he arrived here the day before?
No. So he's saying he did a supply run the day before.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, he did a supply run as normal, got back down to where he was, and saw a forgotten letter. And when he got to the bottom of the hill, and he's like, shoot. So he then says he comes around first thing next morning, his words, to deliver that. And then says arrived late with that missing letter. Those two parts feel weird in my head, and it doesn't feel why. But from what I can understand, he did his supply run, got back to the bottom of the hill, says, shit, forgot to deliver this. It's probably only something he does every month or on a slow schedule. So it's like, if it doesn't happen now, it's not going to happen for a while. So the next morning he sets out and brings it back up. Gets there late in the day. Tries to deliver the letter. Can't. Spends the evening fucking Catherine. And then gets caught by Angela in the morning.
Okay, so you're saying there is another day here. So this happens, and then he spends the night at the monastery, and then he's caught the next morning?
Yes, because according to Catherine, they spent the evening fucking.
Right, I know that. I'm just saying, what's being described here, does it take course over the place of 3 days or 2?
2. I don't think the first delivery is salient.
No, I mean including that. 3 days or 2. So does he first come and then leave and then come back and then spend the night and then get caught the next morning? Or does he get caught when he comes back that same day?
I see what you're saying. I believe this would then be a 3rd day.
Okay, because I didn't read it that way. I read it that he was caught while looking for someone to give the letter to, which would put him getting caught that day that he comes back with the letter. So there's 2 days involved. And if that's the case, I think there's a much simpler explanation here, which is simply that he's lying about what happened. He did not go to the town and go back. He was staying overnight with Catherine, and that part of the testimony isn't true.
I see what you're... So I got hung up in the timing of the...
But I think it really matters what specifically is said, because it could well be that this happened over the course of 3 days rather than 2.
The thing is that what he says specifically is maddeningly vague in that way. He does say first thing next morning. That's how he describes coming back for the letter.
So you say he confirms he's talking about the library at night. Does he say that he was specifically arrived at the library at night?
Yes. That he was looking around trying to find Catherine II and Eustace. Or
night
Catherine
in the
II.
library.
Huh?
At night in the library, he says specifically?
I don't know that he says at night.
Because that's what I'm really interested in, the timeline of what he says.
Because they find the body in the morning, right? Because Charity finds the body on her morning walk.
Yep.
So I guess so then the other way is like, it doesn't make sense any other way, right? Because he would have had, so I guess he's saying he came up that morning trying to find someone to deliver that letter to, couldn't find them, and then got caught up in this. Whereas really what happened was he stayed there overnight with Catherine.
Yep, and he needs an excuse for why he was there, separately for an excuse for why he couldn't be the murderer.
Right. Second question, why would no one notice that he had stayed there overnight? This is just now occurring to me. Wouldn't people notice his cart still there?
Where was the cart located again?
The cart was in front of the Abbey, near the front entrance of it.
That's so interesting. Yeah, that'd be weird.
I'm just now thinking about that. Is Catherine lying about them fucking?
Oh. Holy shit.
Or did he not bring his card up with him? Something about this doesn't sit right? Like this feels weird.
That does feel really weird.
Yeah. I feel like we need to sit with this for a little bit longer. I do think he is eliding something.
And we know he's eliding something.
Yeah.
This can't be exactly what happened.
Anyway, that's the weirdness of James's testimony. Let's now move on to the other testimony we get from Angela.
All right.
According to Angela, reporting the facts as she thinks she knows them. Charity found Catherine II in the cloister, beheaded, next to what she assumes is the murder weapon. Charity alerted the superior. Angela had spent the whole evening in the superior's office arguing about various issues around the abbey with the superior. Angela leaves the office, runs into Eustace coming up from the cellars. Angela instructs her to rouse the rest of the sisters and search the west side of the abbey. Angela searches the grounds east of the abbey while the superior comforts Charity. They find James. She finds James skulking away from the abbey on the east side, and Darcy discovers his bloody cloak not far from his cart on the west side.
So he's skulking away on, according to this testimony, on the opposite side of the abbey,
where his
from
cart
the cart
isn't. Yeah,
and the cloak.
I think we noted this detail as well during the thing. His cart, he's skulking away, not where his cart is, but just kind of skulking away. It's his cart being there is so weird. Ugh. It doesn't sit right with me. But a lot of what Angela says here, I want you to keep that in mind, is like direct contradiction to what Eustace says. So here's what Eustace tells us. Eustace says she got up early to do some work in the library. Charity found Catherine II's body on her morning walk. The body was in the middle of the cloister. It was beheaded, although, according to her, we'd later discover that wasn't her only wound. She takes that to mean that there was a struggle between her and her attacker. Okay. Marta comforts Charity, while the rest of the nuns scramble around looking for the killer. Eustace checks upstairs in the Misericorde in the library. Darcy checks the dorms. She then goes down to the superior's office. Apparently, I was the first to think of letting her know, she says. The superior and Angela then, she thinks we're preparing for the morning's liturgy. But then at that point, those two join the search. She passes Adela coming up from the cellars. The superior, Moira, and Eustace attend to the body while the search continues, in which they take the body to the chapel. Eventually, Angela drags in James, who Eustace vaguely recognizes as being the delivery boy. She says that Angela found him in the east grounds. Darcy wanders in with his bloody cloak from his cart. The superior and Moira drag him immediately to the hospitalum. So, whole lot of stuff that doesn't quite match up there.
Who does Angela say alerted the superior? Was it Charity?
According to Angela, Charity alerts the superior.
And that's not what Eustace says. Eustace says Eustace alerted the superior.
And here's another important part. Eustace says the nuns got this whole thing, started searching on themselves before anyone thought to alert the superior.
Yep.
Whereas in Angela's version, Charity immediately goes to the superior to alert her, and Angela's the one that takes control of getting the nuns to find her. None of what they describe is compatible.
Angela also describes the superior comforting Charity, where Eustace describes Marta comforting Charity.
Yes, while the superior, Moira, and Eustace all tend to the body, which they then bring into the chapel. Yeah, so like put side by, it's easier to miss because they're like separated by a couple hours or so in the actual game, but put side to side like this, holy shit, those don't match at all.
What does match?
What does match? Angela's the one who brings in James.
Charity finds the body. It happens early.
Darcy finds the cloak. It happens early in the morning. Angela is in the superior's office.
James is found to the east.
James is found to the east.
Where the card is.
That matches, which is not where the card is. But Darcy finds his cloak, which is on the west side near his card. Those are the things that match. The little details of Angela seeing Eustace coming up from the cellar and Eustace seeing Adela coming up from the cellar. Those are... What the hell does that even mean? Why is that a contradiction? We don't even know what's important about coming up from the cellars.
Is that a contradiction at all? It makes sense for someone to see someone coming up from the cellars had they been headed there themselves.
Yeah, I guess. But Eustace doesn't mention going down to the cellars at all, and Angela says she came up from there. And Eustace claims she checked upstairs specifically in the Misericorde and in the library. Eustace does not claim to have been looking downstairs. She's very specific about where she was looking. So we have some details that match and just a whole lot of movements of nuns that don't. And some very notably, like, who is comforting Charity? Why is that a contradiction? I guess the other way to look at this is that there were two different sets of looking around, right? Maybe, according to Eustace's testimony, the nuns all looked around on their own. Someone finally thought to go alert the superior, although who alerts her is different in both of these stories. And then after someone alerts the superior, Angela takes over and has them search again, not wary of the fact that they had already done it. But only at that point do they find the cloak covered in blood. Either way, trying to get these to fit, right? It's just...
I think the other thing is memory is fallible, and people's perspectives also are. I could very much believe that Angela thinks she was more important than this than she was. Whether or not she's deliberately obscuring something, it wouldn't surprise me if she thought she was in charge and had this on lock when she absolutely didn't. People were already doing things, and she just showed up and happened to find the guy.
Okay, that checks out.
That doesn't explain the rest of the contradictions, but it feels like there's some things that can make sense based on humans being human and perceiving and remembering and speaking of the world in the ways humans do. And then there's others that are just
who alerted the soup?
That is...
Was it Eustace or was it Charity?
Yep.
Who comforted Charity? Who, like... It's... Yeah, because you're right, absolutely. We shouldn't overlook the fact that, like, humans are humans, memory is fallible. Even when you're trying to remember something, some things will slip or alter. Understandable. That maybe it explains Angela's oversized importance in her own memory, right? But it doesn't explain the distinct discrepancies in who is doing what. But it also makes it very interesting the things they agree on. I do want to highlight one more piece of information we got from Darcy.
Yeah?
Because Darcy goes into detail about finding the cloak. According to Darcy, Angela found James trying to run from the Abbey, and his cloak was covered in blood. She says, I found the cloak. She was busy putting out a fire in the dormitory and only noticed the cart in the distance out of the window. Someone had put too much fuel in the fireplace and was blowing embers around. It was more of a nuisance than a danger, but it could have gotten out of hand. Darcy didn't go out to the cart to look. She was doing something else and just happened to see it.
Yep.
According to her.
This confirms a couple things. One is that the cart was definitely somewhere visible. So it's not like, oh, it's off near the front entrance, but somewhere it wouldn't be obvious. It was right out in the open, where folks could easily see it from a window. So that's interesting. It also seems kind of likely that someone was burning something on purpose. Like that was what I was thinking. Like someone was trying to hide something at that point, was trying to burn it to get rid of it. And it's in the dormitory specifically, and that's a place that we don't get a ton of testimony about. Does anyone say that someone went to search the dormitory?
Yes, Eustace says that Darcy checked the dorms, which...
That tracks. Darcy was in the dorms. Yep, Darcy was, according to Darcy's testimony. So, we get a lot of things that do line up, and then a lot of things that don't, and I don't know what to make of it. You better bet your bottom dollar that I'm going to keep coming back to this as we get more testimony throughout Volume 2. Yep. Because I can only assume we're going to get more of it. But I think the whole kerfuffle around when did James arrive might just be me getting confused over something that ultimately isn't important. Although I maybe someone who has read this more recently than us can clear it up a little bit, because I remember taking notes on this again and going back and reading the scene and still feeling really confused about what he was trying to convey with all this, about like specifically his timeline leading up to that. If someone else knows for sure what he's trying to say here, let us know. I do find it interesting that Darcy's testimony here doesn't contradict anybody's. Right? So far. Angela says Darcy discovered his bloody cloak not far from his cart. That's true if the cloak wasn't far from his cart, but Darcy was somewhere else, noticed it, and then, okay. Yeah, that doesn't seem to explicitly contradict anyone else's. So that does give her a certain amount of solidity, I guess. Yeah. I think it's just interesting to think of, in each of these cases, who can't be telling the truth at the same time. There's got to be at least one person here who is mistaken or lying. Yeah. And Darcy doesn't have to be. It seems like the things she's saying is lining up with other folks.
Mhm.
So we don't have anything that presses us to doubt her. We do
Now-
have things that press us to doubt at least one of Eustace
Yeah.
and Angela. Even setting aside James's testimony, if we're just thinking
Yes.
the nuns, those both can't be true at the same time.
I do think it's also important to note that Darcy was offering this information to us to Hedy when they were talking about James. Darcy was not asked specifically for her testimony
Mm-hmm.
or her alibi even for that morning.
Mm-hmm.
This was just information she offered. And that does change the character of it a little bit, but not by much. It's just worth noting. Anything else we want to cover on what we know so far about Catherine's the state of affairs around Catherine's death?
Do we know where James says he was when he was apprehended?
Where James says he was when he was apprehended. We know Angela finds him. Angela is always the one who finds him.
Yeah.
Angela
But
says
what does
she's
he
looking on
say
the
about it?
east side.
Because everybody else says the east side. But what does
Yeah.
he say about it?
He was looking around for someone to ask for help when someone grabbed him and said they caught him.
'Cause that's interesting. It'd be surprising for one to look around for help
Be looking around
Off
for
to
someone.
the east side.
Right, because I don't know that it means that he was running away from the Abbey. It seems like the way he describes it, he was looking around the Abbey innocently trying to find someone to help him. Angela says she searched the ground east of the Abbey and found James skulking away from the Abbey. That's a much different character.
Mm-hmm.
James said he was just innocently looking for someone to help. Angela's like, I found him trying to skulk away. Angela could indeed be embellishing. It could be that James was indeed found on the premises, but she's like, oh, you're trying to get away, huh? But that's not how she tells it. Eustace only says that Angela eventually shows up and repeats what she says. Angela found him in the East Grounds.
It was interesting that being in the east grounds doesn't seem to be where one would look for a person to help.
Yeah, exactly. And is that to Angela embellishing a little bit? Like somewhere out on the east grounds of the Abbey? Or is James lying? And again, just because he's lying doesn't mean he's the guilty party either, which is...
I think it's more than embellishing a bit, right? Either he was in the east grounds or he wasn't. And if he wasn't, then it would be surprising.
I could see a version where Angela's like, okay, y'all search the west grounds, I'm going to search the east. She heads off to search the east grounds and finds James in the building on her way to head that direction.
So not in the east grounds, right?
Right, on the east side of the Abbey, but not on the east grounds.
Yeah. Because
But then in the telling, that then becomes, I found him in the east grounds because that's where I was going to go look.
Yeah, that'd be a very different statement, right? Because she'd be saying he's in the east grounds when he in fact isn't. There's a pretty clear fact of the matter about whether he was outside the Abbey or not.
Yeah. And we're getting different opinions on that.
I don't know that we are. We don't specifically hear him say where he was. It just seems it'd be a weird place for someone to be looking for help outside the Abbey, off to the east, away from the main
I'm
entrance.
out here in this wheat field trying to find help and ain't no one around.
Yeah.
That would be very strange. All right. We have a couple of random... not random ones. At this point, I'd like to turn our attention towards some of the post-game stuff. Some of the stuff that comes up at the very, very, very end. First thing, unrelated to the extra scene, who's in the main menu art? Did we ever figure that out?
I don't think we did.
I don't ever think we did.
My guess is dead Catherine.
Dead Catherine. That's a pretty solid guess. It might just be I'm not recognizing them because of art style reasons. I'm notoriously bad at stuff like that and rely way too heavily on hair color, which is conveniently hidden by a habit. But we are not given a portrait of Catherine II in the post game cast screen, right?
Yep.
The tip screen. So I guess it could be her, but we just don't know. Worth pointing out. All right. Here's the juicy stuff.
Yeah.
Who the fuck is this interloper in my CG screen?
Unknown Nun X.
Who the fuck is this? What's going on? Huh? What is this story she found lying around? Why does she seem to be in her own story as this weird flaneur passante?
Wait. Hold up. I think you're several steps ahead of me here.
I don't think so, but go ahead.
Why are we talking about someone who is a flaneur passante? Passant, probably.
Yep.
What does that have to do with the person showing up in the CGs?
Notably, the person that Alex encounters on the plane, right? The weird lady who leaves their handbag behind. She is also described as with bangs that cover her eyes, which is the one notable detail we get of our interloper on the CG screen. Bangs that fully cover her eyes.
So we are jumping a couple of steps ahead to assuming that the person we see in the CGs is this person in the framing device because of a similarity described in the narration. That's the sort of thing I was getting at. Like,
okay,
I was way behind you there.
Yeah. Why does it seem to be the same person?
I don't know
what is their
does.
deal? What the hell is up with the weird fascination with the leg? Why is that a thing that rhymes?
It'll probably help to spell this out again.
What, Flora's missing leg and then Alex's missing leg.
Is Flora's leg missing?
Yes, her leg gets caught in the door.
Is it described that the leg is removed, or is it described that?
Yeah. I don't know that it's described that the leg is removed.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I think we explicitly don't hear that.
But I think I think it is implied that something happens to it based on the description of.
We know something happens to it stuck in a door.
So the door finally opens. Hedy gets through the door. It catches Flora's foot, though, and Flora's like, I can't feel anything. Flora's not moving anymore. Yeah. I don't think it's ever explicitly said. It's just kind of like, it's interesting that we're given that fact, and then that leads into that little bit in the videotape we're shown.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, the videotape that was, what was it? Just found it lying around?
Yep.
What is the deal with all this?
I'm interested in addressing these separately.
Okay, we can do that. We can do that. I just wanted to get a whole bunch of stuff on the table. So let's.
So an interloper in the CG screen. I've kind of got two ways I've been turning this over in my head.
Let's hear it.
One of them being maybe there is somebody else here, and Hedwig's retelling is explicitly excluding it, and this person showing up and showing us a scene we don't know of and so on would make sense. Being like, hey. Like, Hedwig's not telling you the whole truth.
Yeah, like Hedwig is hiding
stuff is being left out. For example, me.
Yeah.
So that could be one thing. The other I have thought is that this is someone who was there and is different than how they seem in the main narrative.
Right. So like maybe the way Hedy is showing or conveying these people to us. So that would imply a level of distrust in the art.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to make that very clear.
Yep. That it would.
Fascinating.
So those are the kind of two ways I've been thinking about it. You bring up a third, that this person is the person from the videotape.
Yeah, this strange passant. I don't flaneur, this dandy about town who just happens to found a VHS lying around somewhere or another.
Now, what is this about finding VHS lying around? What is it that you're referring to?
She went before the story. She says, I found it lying here. You can have this story. I found it lying around somewhere or another. And then the vignetting of the story we see itself, plus the VHS eject sound at the very end, makes it sound like a VHS tape. I'm not saying it's a literal VHS tape. I was being blithe in how I was referring to the story she gave us.
Okay.
Huh. So yeah, what's her deal? So yeah, someone left out of the narrative, I think, or someone obscured from the narrative, I think is a very, very... I think that's got to be the most grounded, weirdly, way of looking at it that I've encountered so far. I've been like turning it over and over in my head, and like all the things my brain comes up with are weird, fanciful metafiction devices, and I'm like, that doesn't have to be the case. Come on now.
But also, let's just put this on the table. Clearly, the author of this is about Umineko, right? Like, there's no way the author of this is not into that. And for someone who is into that, it would be almost surprising if there weren't.
Listen,
I've
gone this entire time without being explicit about that.
Yeah.
Right? It is clear that ZC has a soft spot in their heart for Umineko and that reading that has affected them. Go listen to their cover of Dead Angle on YouTube. It's very good. But I also don't want to use that as my justification because I don't want my engagement with this to seem like it's not its own work, standing on its own merits. You know what I mean? Even
aside from that, I think metafiction is definitely involved in some way, shape, or form. We're already getting narrative devices within narrative devices. A story about telling a story and then somebody else telling about their work in the business of selling stories and so on.
And regardless, it's important to note that we determined what dates the story at the end might have taken place in, like the 1980s, I believe we came down with somewhere in there, based on the smoking laws. That's just not something someone in the 1400s could ever know about.
Sorry, what? I missed the start of that sentence.
This story that we get at the very end about Alex in the airport, we deduced based on some stuff takes place in the 1980s. That's just not something that someone in the 1400s, even telling the most fanciful of stories, would be able to tell you. Which means that there has to be a layer of this story that is either timeless or in the future. Which is fucked up. I think Alex as a character is interesting. I really like their vibe. I can't help but feel like they said they're on their way to England. That feels like just the biggest layup into they're going to Linbarrow for some reason, right? That feels like what's about to happen here. But I couldn't tell you what that means. Why is this story that Hedwig is reporting in 1483, why is that location worth looking into in the future? If that's indeed what is happening there. That's the only way my brain can think to connect those stories in a vacuum without some other weird goddess of storytelling nonsense where it's telling the same story but filtered through two different lenses of time period, creating the same narrative but with different set dressing. I don't think that's it, but my brain doesn't stop working on these things, okay? Oh, man. I gotta say, encountering that for the first time, we had just wrapped recording, you burst out of the bathroom with your phone and you're like, nope, turn it all back on, we gotta go.
We didn't hit the end yet, we gotta start over.
I love it. I do love being thrown for such a thorough loop that I might have to throw my hands up and be like, fuck man, I don't know. Oh,
I do love the 11th hour monkey wrench as well. Like, we were already sold on this and deep into this game, and then it's like, oh, by the way, all of those things you thought also make no fucking sense. Fuck you. Come back next time if you want to have the barest shred of a hope of understanding what the fuck is going on.
Weirdly enough, I kind of like your idea for her, the interloper being a character elided in Hedwig's retelling, because then that also dovetails with the idea of this demonic figure being something that Hedwig doesn't think should be there. And that's her way of cognitively dealing with it. Maybe the demonic figure is actually whoever this interloper is, who I'm also just somehow hard assuming is the flaneur as well.
That's the bit that gets me. I had not, until this, been making that identification.
Really?
And
it's specifically the fact that the art we're shown of her, bangs covering the eyes. That's not a common decision, because as someone who has had bangs covering their eyes for a while, you can't see shit. And then to have that as well show up in Alex's story, it makes it seem like they're some kind of timeless person outside of this narrative, or somehow, aware of the story that we are reading. Not the story Hedwig is telling to someone in 1483, but the story that we are reading of Hedwig telling that story to someone in 1483. But I also don't want to think about what that means too hard but if you've had any other thoughts about that, by the way, feel free to let us know, because I feel like I'm up against a wall now. Then again, that's also kind of a delightful feeling.
Yeah.
To be just so thoroughly confronted with something you can't get, you're like, yeah, all right, no choice but to just let this happen, kind of bask in it for a moment. It's a beautiful feeling, and I thank you, ZC, for letting me have that feeling. That's wonderful. Mwah! Chef's kiss. Oh, all right, we're at the very, very end now. I've got a handful of hot takes I want to share.
Okay.
Swing for the fences, Smits. I think the soup might have been a prostitute before working at the Abbey.
Why?
Based entirely on her one reaction to that one, this when she's talking to Hedwig about whores. Based on her one reaction to that in that scene, it seemed more like that was like, oh, this is a very to something that kind of didn't really need to be talked about in context. She's like, oh, those people are the worst, and oh, they could never be saved. I'm like, I think the lady doth protesteth too much. That's a big swing for the fences there. Here's another big swing for the fences. I think Angela and Catherine the First were an item for a bit.
Why? You're going to notice a theme here.
Because they seem to have such a singular and particular hate for one another. And not just like in the kind of way where like they're just angry at each other and don't like one another. In the way where they go to great lengths to piss each other off. Right? We noticed that during the time we saw them in the Misericorde together. It wasn't just that they are bristly and rubbing shoulders with one another. They went out of their way to keep that fight going and start it with one another. That to me reads more like jilted lover. Maybe I just have brain poisoning. Another big swing for the fences. Eustace and Hedwig are colluding for some reason to some end that I don't know, but I'll get back to you on it. Can you tell this is the section where all the half-baked shit goes? And this isn't my swing for the fences, but someone else in the comments section brought this idea up that James in custody might be King James III of Scotland.
I see.
Which, interesting. Mayhaps. It would make sense for the time period, but I don't know about anything else. Do you have any batshit swing for the fence theories you want to put in here in the...
I don't think so. I think all of the things that I had theories about, I said.
Noted. All the things you think are well-grounded and
I don't think that's what I said.
Substantiated by the text.
I don't think that's in any way what I said.
I don't think I have any more completely baseless hot takes to share with you. Wow. I'm so glad we finally did this. I'm sorry it took so long after we finished. And that it required us to rewatch the entire thing to get back up to it, but it wouldn't have felt right for our book club channel to not give Volume 1 its due before moving on and reading Volume 2. I think it was important for us to do that. So we will not be starting Volume 2 until after we finish Mamiya. Just so we don't have all these things juggled in the air, but
yep.
I want you to know that will be the thing we're turning to when we're done with Mamiya. So please look forward to Volume 2 here on Two Queers Play. Your favorite book club, not a Let's Play channel. Never has been. I don't know why you would think that. And anything you want to add?
No.
Smash that like, comment and subscribe.